Welcome, fellow brave believers. This is Kingdom Cast. This is the podcast where we search for knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of His Word and this world so we can better relate His Word to this world. Thank you for joining me. I'm Sean, your host. This is an extension channel of Kingdom in Context, our main channel. If you haven't seen any content from our main channel, go subscribe. Kingdom in Context. Thank you all for being here. We're going to be picking up our Investigating Babylon series and do part 20. It's Mother Babylon, the Dragon's Lair. So I thank everyone that's been patient with us for this last 12 to 13 months as we've been producing these one step at a time and to try to help people come into a better understanding. Each part of the series addresses a different facet, and part 20 is no different. We're going to look specifically at Mother Babylon. And there's 21 total episodes, or parts, I should say, that we'll do in this series. So I hope to have the final part 21 ready before the end of the year, which would be within the week. So I thank you guys for waiting so long and being so faithful to like, share, and subscribe, and to share these if you're blessed by them, so other people can find out about them. But thank you everyone that's in the live chat. This is part 2, if you will, of our doubleheader today. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So we are looking at part 20 of Investigating Babylon. This is Mother Babylon, the Dragon's Lair. Throughout this entire series, I've been taking you step by step through these different concepts. We did 7 different parts in the past. We did 7 different parts in the present. And now we're finishing the 7 different parts in the future. Every single bit of information in each part of these is connected to this topic. It's a huge topic. So I hope that you understand that I could not do this in one broadcast. And after part 20, after what you're about to watch, I think you'll fully understand why. You have to understand the supplemental pieces of information and history and scripture to get a full grasp about what Mother Babylon is, why it's destroyed in Revelation 18. And I'm excited to get into it further. So let's look real quick at a clip from one of the second most wealthy men in the world. This is Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon. And he's going to be talking to us about what he and his friends believe the future is going to be, what they're engineering all of society to get ready to become the future of the world.
We get to choose. Do we want stasis and rationing? Or do we want dynamism and growth? Where would 1 trillion humans live? Somebody named Jerry O'Neill, a physics professor, looked at this question very carefully, and he asked a very precise question that nobody had ever asked before. And it was, is a planetary surface the best place for humans to expand into the solar system? No. So, instead, what O'Neill and his students came up with was the idea of manufactured worlds. These are very large structures, miles on end, and they hold 1 million people or more each. Let's take a look at what they might look like inside. High-speed transport, agricultural areas, cities in the background. They don't all have to have the same gravity. You could have a recreational one that keeps 0G so that you can go flying with your own wings. Some of these O'Neill colonies might choose to replicate Earth cities. No rain, no storms, no earthquakes. What does the architecture even look like when it no longer has its primary purpose of shelter? People are going to want to live here. And they can be close to Earth so that you can return. Did anybody in science fiction ever predict this? And if not, why not? And he has a very good answer. Watch this.
Did you anticipate anything like this in any of your science fiction?
Nobody did really, because we've all been planet chauvinists. We've all believed people should live on the surface of a planet, of a world. I've had colonies on the moon, so have 100 other science fiction writers. The closest I came to a manufactured world in free space was to suggest that we go out to the asteroid belt and hollow out the asteroids and make ships out of them. It never occurred to me to bring the material from the asteroids in towards the Earth, where conditions are pleasanter, and build the worlds there.
Where does it take us? What does it mean for Earth? Earth ends up zoned residential and light industry. Who is going to do this work? Not me. These kids in the front rows, you guys are going to do this, and your children are going to do this. This is going to take a long time. This is a big vision.
Did you guys hear that? Did you guys hear him? They want to build living habitats in the sky. They want to do it in the upper atmosphere. Now they believe in a heliocentric model. Not that particular dude talking. I promise you, he does not believe in a heliocentric model, but he knows that's what you've been told to believe. So that's why he's explaining the narrative as he is. They still plan to build living habitats in the sky, and it's going to be under the guise of caring for our planet, that the Earth is not sustainable, where there's too many of us here, so we're going to have to put our living space up there so the Earth can heal. It's all under the environmental global climate change narrative. They've been instilling into the culture and the society worldwide. They're going to be continuing to reinforce that at every step with every new policy, because what they're doing with climate change taxation that they're already enforcing in certain countries and trying to enforce across the world is they're going to be stealing the money from you in order to try to accomplish what he just talked about. Oh, by the way, did you guys catch how at one point he said you could even have a different one that has 0G and you could fly with your own wings? So this is obviously going to be a part of the transhumanism agenda. They truly want to have people living in the sky. There's going to be normalization. Did you hear at the very end where he talked about the down on the ground might be where you come to go to school, but up above, he said, how do you say? His Earth is going to be zoned as light industrial. That means all the other things that you might need to be doing, you have to go. Go look up Jeff Bezos space habitats, and you can watch the full speech if you'd like. And he talks about how the plan is for certain people to live up there, certain people to live down here. It's very much like we saw in a movie came out a few years ago with Matt Damon called Elysium, where the wealthy class had incredible habitats in the sky, and the lower class was the working force that lived on the ground. Guys, this is literally the ancient Sumerian creation tales. This is literally from ancient Sumeria with the Anunnaki coming to Earth and hybridizing a monkey race on Earth to make them a worker force while the gods lived in the sky and the worker force lived on the ground to mine gold for them. This is literally the same narrative they want to achieve in reality. And as we've been talking about in the previous 19 parts of this series, they worship the gods of the Sumerians, the gods of the Hittites, the gods of the Canaanites, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Hindus, or I should say the gods of ancient India. They worship the same gods, the same story, the same plan. The same plan for them, the same plan for you. Part of how they want to achieve this is through what they call space towers. Sometimes they refer to these as space elevators. There's different types, different concepts. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty, the minutia of exactly all the different types that they think they could be feasible. These, of course, again, they're based on a heliocentric model, trying to falsely promote the idea that you could go into low Earth orbit literally by getting on a big elevator, right? That they could build these, and that they claim that the physics is going to be easier once you get higher up, and therefore it's be sustainable. And I'm just laughing because I'm like, yeah, first time a 777 has a electrical navigation problems and runs into these, it'd be hilarious. But this is the idea that they've been pushing for several years now. Yes, it's based on a global heliocentric model. That's not the point. Everything they do is built under that auspice, that lie of the global heliocentric model. But what they want to do in the reality of how they plan to get resources to something that could be in the sky. We're gonna cover how they plan to levitate these cities in the sky. I'm going to go over multiple ways within science that people are already doing today that could sustain living habitats in the sky for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. You've got to get resources to them, right? This is why they're talking about building space towers, large elevators, supply chains. And they're already pushing this into the indoctrination of all modern forms of media and entertainment. This is from, I believe it's a Netflix show called Altered Carbon. I think that's where this image was pulled, but they already have space towers with ridiculously large skyscrapers. They even have a levitating space habitat that's already it's a low Earth orbit, high altitude space habitat where horrific things are done to young women up there. Like it's a Netflix show, so there's some not cool stuff in there. But the point is, this is just one of many different things. It's in comics, it's in anime. They're going after the younger ones. That's why you heard at the end of his speech, Jeff Bezos says, "Who's going to do this? Not me." He points to the kids in the front row. It's going to be you guys. You're going to be the ones that do all this. All of the subliminals, all of the indoctrination of the things being presented in modern entertainment, arts, and media is geared towards the children to want to do this and want to be a part of this. Like you said, people are going to want to live there. It's going to be amazing. They're already starting the public propaganda for this. And this is not nobody. This is Jeff Bezos himself giving a speech about this. Talk about shelling. I wonder what that conversation went like. And I'm sure he wants Amazon to be the one supplies these things. But anyway, it's just, so let's look actually real quick. Let's look at how people are talking about space towers.
The most expensive thing about skyscrapers is doing all that construction high up in.
Yes, guys, this particular guy has a lisp. Please don't make fun of him. And just try to listen.
The air, building from the bottom up. You actually can build active support structures from the top down. You start on the ground, build a level, levitate it up, build the next level, levitate those up, and so on. It's sort of like those.
Did you guys hear that? Now this is the clip from a much longer video. And he just glazes right over within what he's trying to describe as far as building space towers, how they could achieve great heights. Build one level that's levitated. Then on top of that, you build another level that's levitated. And then you would take all of your construction materials to that second level, build a third level that's levitating. That means there's no big pillars. Then you build, keep building layer by layer, just like that. And then we're going to go over the technology that they've already stumbled upon, I should say, rediscovered, for how to levitate large amounts of weights. Okay, so stick with us.
New buildings that we can make with large 3D printers, only backwards. The building just rises up as you go, and hypothetically, you could keep adding more height to the thing as it grows. At the top of a space tower though, one rising up just above the atmosphere, you could have a cargo pad suitable for direct pickup with either the rotating skyhook or cardio rotavator design we discussed in that episode. We also discussed buoyancy earlier on, and the notion of holding up a launch track using these dynamic structures as support pylons, but we can use active support for buoyancy too. Those vacuum balloons I mentioned earlier can be constructed a lot thinner and lighter by using active support to make the skin around them stronger. We picture active support as pretty big, but recall that the active support element from the launch loop was just a wire 5 centimeters wide and hollow, and that's intended to be strong enough to support a 5-ton ship and stretch thousands of kilometers. You can use that exact same principle, scaled down, say a wire a few millimeters wide and hollow, to craft a series of rings tilted at angles to each other to form a spherical shell, for instance, and we will actually discuss using a scaled up version of that concept to create artificial planets briefly next episode.
Sorry, guys. I think I was still muted. So, did you guys catch that? That he's actually talking about the building techniques that's going to get you to ridiculous heights, and he's he's not just talking about science fiction concepts. We're going to go over some of the technology that has been rediscovered about people, how they can actually levitate concepts. There's multiple ways. And in one of those clips, he was just showing a large helium-based blimp, style platform. But that's like the least of the options that are out there. And so he's going to go over, or he doesn't go over it in that particular video. I'm going to go over it in other concepts here to show. But at the very end, why I still have this on screen, is he's talking about how they could use these structures, and instead of trying to just build them straight up, you could actually build them in a concentric rings that cross and connect, effectively building the exoskeleton of what looks like a sphere. Now he calls it a planet, but looks like a sphere, and that in itself creates incredible strength. And we're gonna talk about that here as we continue. So let me get right to it, guys. We talked about this in Image of the Beast. We talked about La Puta, which is the Spanish word for the whore. It's interesting. Interesting name for a floating city. This was originally from the 1700s, I think 1759 book, Gulliver's Travels, written by Jonathan Swift. And it was also used in a 1986 anime called Castle in the Sky. But it has various different interpretations or representations in many different media, arts and media. And the original, though, from Jonathan Swift, the image that you're seeing here, or the representation of the image of what he describes in the book you're seeing here, he actually called La Puta. And the men of the island of La Puta were obsessed with astronomy, looking to the stars for answers, to the point where their necks developed some sort of crick. And they had a funny look about them because they were always looking down on a telescope to look at the sky. I think that's interesting. This was a floating city. There's been different variations of it depicted in different types of art and media. It looks ridiculous, I know, at first thought, right? According to the physics that we know and understand, it looks ridiculous. But there's apparently more to it. This was from the anime, cartoon and comic graphic novel, The Castle in the Sky. We talked about in part 17, Image of the Beast episode, where the robot that you see behind the little girl and the goats, that he is the Talos representation from ancient Greece, the one who guarded the island where Zeus lives. And this particular robot comes down to befriend this girl in this anime. There's been many different concepts of this castle in the sky that's been depicted. It's also in video games everywhere. It's in all types of science fiction. It's these ideas of floating fortresses and bases and castles in the sky. In part 5, we talked about this quote from Publius Virgilius Maro from the 1st century BC. He's a Greek poet, philosopher. And he spoke about Mount Olympus being in the sky, looking over the spread earth below, being the throne of Zeus. And itself, this landmass that was referred to as Mount Olympus, was double gated with the dome over it. So if you complete a dome, it becomes a sphere. You call something a dome because usually of what it actually just encapsulates, or because of what it encloses. So if there's land as your surface and you have the arched structure of a dome over you, that's all you would see because the land's below you. But if the structure that creates the dome over you was one solid piece as an actual sphere, then it means it comes under you as well to complete the sphere. We talked in depth about Mount Olympus and the home of the gods in part 5. Please go check that out if you haven't already seen it. This is another representation of Jonathan Swift's novel from the 1700s and La Puta that was floating on a disc in the sky. An entire city full of people floating on a disc in the sky. This is another representation of it from artwork graphic from a cartoon. Massive castle-like structure floating in the sky. People might say, well, how is this even possible? That sounds crazy. How is this possible? There's something that's called quantum locking, and we're going to take a look at a quick video here. There's multiple ways. This is the first of the many ways that we're going to look at of how they promise you and show you that they can support incredible weights in the sky without stilts, without pillars, without a foundational building, completely levitated. And it's just through natural physics. It's not through, there's no sleight of hand, there's no trick here. It's just through natural physics. So let me pull this up real quick.
Really see the result of many, many years of hard work. And let me start by quoting a famous science fiction novelist, Arthur C. Clarke, who said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And let me rephrase that and say that any sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic. And let me show you some magic. So I have here a very cold superconductor, a disk, which is a superconductor. And when I put this superconductor, I can't touch it with my fingers. That's why I needed the tweezers. And it just levitates. I don't know if you can see this, but maybe you could help them. It just levitates in free air. Okay? Now, there's no strings, nothing. It just levitates. Superconductivity is a phenomenon of exactly zero electrical resistance and expulsion of magnetic fields which occur in certain material. So, sounds complicated, but let's try to understand that. What is electrical resistance? So, in every conductor, there are these current-carrying particles, the electrons. And these electrons, they collide with the atoms, they collide with each other. And they lose a certain amount of their energy. And we all know that because, they dissipate their energy into heat. And in our everyday life, there is always some friction. In everything we do, we lose a certain amount of energy. But not here. In superconductor, they do not lose any of their energy. It's a quantum state of the matter. Now, it turns out that it's not the only thing. And as another physicist, Meissner, discovered, superconductors and magnetic fields have a very unique relationship. And it turns out that superconductors do not like magnetic fields. They try to expel the magnetic field from the inside. And how do they do that? Simply by driving currents inside, because currents do not cost any energy. They are superconductors. So they will create small electromagnets which will cancel the external field. I'm sorry for the technicality. It will soon be over, I promise. Now, the combination of both effects is a superconductor. Now, do you understand the levitation yet? No. So that's not enough. Sometimes magnetic field lines, strands of magnetic field remain inside this superconductor. And because this is a quantum physical effect, quantum effect, the magnetic field behave like quantum particles, like quantum object. You can see here in this film taken by a Japanese scientist how this flux line, how these magnetic field lines, they flow discretely inside the material. Remember, this is magnetic field lines, and they behave like particles, because this is quantum physics. And if you look closely at the film, you see that some of these fluxons, some of these flux lines are pins. They do not move. And the reason for that is that the superconductor doesn't like the magnetic field lines moving around. So what it actually does, it locks them in place. And by doing that, it locks itself. Look, this is the disk before we cooled it. The magnetic field lines just go through and through. And when we cool it, some of it is expelled. This is the Meissner. But some of it remain, and the superconductor locks these magnetic field lines, invisible lines. And what actually happens is quantum locking. I have to cool it with liquid nitrogen because all these nice properties only happen below a certain temperature. That's the downside, for now at least, until we find new materials. So I'm going to take this superconductor, and now I can lock it. I can force the magnetic field lines inside the material, and it will stay locked. I can rearrange the fluxon. It will stay locked like this, or like this. And it is three-dimensional locking. This is not repulsion. It's not like two magnets. No, nothing like that. Because if I turn this upside down, it just stays. Okay? Forget everything you know about classical physics. This is different. Okay? That's my point to you.
So you guys catch that? Forget everything you know about classical physics. This is different. He says it a couple times during this presentation. Again, this is clips of a much longer presentation, trying to get the most pertinent parts, the highlights. This is a specific group of scientists as a part of the Tel Aviv University that deal with superconductors and this type of chemistry. So it's very, very interesting.
Forget everything. The superconductor will have no problem circulating, moving around the axis of symmetry, because as long as it's rotating, nothing changes. It's symmetric. So if I'm going to take this superconductor, I'm going to lock it inside. Now I get frictionless motion, and it's still levitating, and I can turn it upside down, I can move it, and it rotates without any friction besides the friction of air, of course. So the basis of...
Yes. As you guys can see, you can have an object locked in a position on an unseen XY axis in the air that actually is moving in that position, but not moving to cover any distance. So, yes, and also like some people are saying in the live chat, gravity debunked. The world works in much better ways than this ridiculously poorly exemplified theoretical concept called gravity, right? There is obviously a downward pull that we all observe, but scientists have what I would say rediscovered, or at least are now revealing to the mass public how you can actually manipulate that at a very affordable cost. And they're going to talk about that as well. Yes, they're also going to talk about what these little freezed wafers are made of and how they make them.
Of any quantum levitation application, at least that I think of, in the future, would be the frictionless motion that we get here. Let me tell you a little bit about the material, the superconductor itself. Now, I won't go into details, but there is something very important you should know about this. And mainly that most of this disk, you see this is a few millimeter thick disk, most of it is non-superconducting. It's just substrate and thermal cover and so on. And the actual superconductor is only half a micron thick, less than the thickness of a hair, a human hair. And this half a micron thick superconductor levitates more than 70,000 times its own weight. It's a remarkable effect. It's a very strong effect. Why? Because it's quantum physics. It's a new set of intuition.
Okay, guys, did you see that? Not only did he skip over the fact that it's actually sapphire, he calls it a substrate, but he's talking about how once it's locked, the things that you could support, the weight that it could support is 70,000 times. It's little bitty weights. So even though this is a little bitty sapphire wafer the size of a hair, which is a super light, now imagine building that to the size of, I don't know, a football field. Because as he's going to explain here, the materials, it's not pure sapphire. There's other materials he puts under there. And sapphire, if you're not aware, is the most abundant rock, if I could put it like that, on the earth. There's so many different types of sapphire. It's one of the most abundant mineral rocks on the earth. And it's supposedly second in strength on the Bohr's, I think it's the Bohr scale, next to diamond. So sapphire. everywhere in the earth. All types of crystalline structures are made a variant of sapphire. You could easily create something the size of multiple football fields if you had the time. Let me see. When did the men of the earth, when did mankind have enough time and resource all together to have the ability to build something that big? That's interesting. Okay, I'm sorry. It's not Bohr scale, it's Mohs scale. Thank you. My wife is correcting me in the chat. He's almost done.
Basically, what we do is very simple. We take this sapphire disk, and you can see the glow behind the disk. These are just atoms that we throw on the sapphire. It's quite simple. The atoms fall on the sapphire, and they just grow if you have the right recipe. If I take this circular rail, you see these are just two circles of magnets. And if I take...
I want to stop real quick because I don't want to skip over that too much, what he just talked about when he showed the actual construction of the sapphire wafer. And he's saying we're putting the atoms of the other materials on there that he had on that little sheet, and then that he's growing the sapphire. I've actually covered that in another video. It's in my creation playlist on Kingdom in Context, where I show the idea of copper being grown within water, within electrolysis, just to show people the idea that, my wife and I, we actually go to the mountains and we'll dig out crystals, right? We'll dig out quartz crystals, really beautiful. She uses them to wrap jewelry, and she's an artist, and she'll make beautiful jewelry pieces out of them. Big shout out to Cleft of the Rock Creations on YouTube. Go subscribe. So we see that the earth, we dig down into the earth and we pull out these crystalline structures, and they're growing connected with all the soil and the water and all the other minerals that are in the soil of the earth. So it makes perfect sense that if you're adding that mineral with other minerals, that they're compatible to grow, just like I showed with the other video of the copper literally being grown before your eyes underneath water. That's a metal. That's not even but the point is, it's all the same creation. The Father made this creation to work together. This is just them figuring out a way to get these things to work in a very micro setting so they can grow them to their own specific design for this purpose. So this is not rocket science, guys. This is just understanding how the creation works.
If you have the right recipe. If I take this circular rail, you see these are just two circles of magnets. And if I take the disk and put this on the rail, you'll see that it immediately starts moving. I give it a little push, and that's enough. It will keep rotating until it warms up. So there's no friction at all. Now, I can do the same thing on this rail, but upside down, because again, this is not magnetic repulsion. So if I take this disk and pin it below the rail, it will just move below the rail. Again, forget everything you know. This is not classical physics. You forgot? Okay. So this is quantum levitation and quantum locking in space, right? Remember, liquid nitrogen is cheap. It's cheaper than milk. So cooling is no problem. There are other problems for sure, but cooling is not a problem. And you can see it's very easy to handle. So I'm going to take another.
So real quick, everyone, I just want to point out in case you missed it there, but he's talking about not only can it levitate and move in that space above magnets in this quantum lock state, but also it can be hung beneath something, also beneath a magnetic force and locked in that state to be suspended. So not just levitated, but suspended, reference of direction, so that it can stay in that space and move in that space. Well, again, this is why, we try to stress that the scriptures tell us what the Creator made this world to be like. So when we test things, hypothesis and theories to figure out how the the reality that we exist in actually works, I suggest that it's going to help you to start with the basis of the creator's descriptions and not the occultist lying descriptions of a heliocentric globe model, which tries to tell you that you can have a pressurized atmosphere of 18 quintillion parts per square inch without a barrier next to an infinite vacuum. So that kind of nonsense description of creation is not what we would want to use as our base backbone for testing new theories and ideas. There has been a wealth of science that has been produced and published for people that observe that we live in an electromagnetic reality. And this is what causes the striation of the atmospheric layering, and the idea of the downward pull is an electromagnetic energy that permeates through all of creation. And then the buoyancy and the density, which is what we're going to talk about here in a minute, also helps to layer out everything we see, as far as something that's more dense would fall below things less dense. And all of that is governed, if you will, determined by an electromagnetic reality. So therefore, this guy's presentation is built upon magnets and quantumly locking a specific cooled sapphire crystalline structure on top of magnets, on top of a magnetic pool. So it's not implausible that you could manipulate that to a greater degree than these microscopic little examples he's doing, these stage shows. Just like in all the science we're about to look at for the next 30 minutes. All of it's on a micro scale, very, very small scale, to show you what's possible. Just as in everything else we've ever stumbled onto in science and innovation, it never stays at a micro scale, because they realize they can scale it up in different ways for the purpose to benefit their agenda or to benefit others. So just keep that in mind as we go through these ideas. I know some of these ideas may be a little heady, but I'm trying to address them and keep the audience, following as much as possible.
Another disc, and I'm going to lock it above the rail at a certain position, and I'm just going to let it flow without any friction. And then I'm going to take another disc, and I'm going to lock it at a different configuration, and then I'm going to let them spin. Thank you.
So now we have two different concepts that are spinning in a circuit and quantumly locked at different altitudes and traversing each other. Did you guys see the end of that? So that is quantum locking with superconducting sapphire wafers. So truly, this thing that's been talked about for a long time, from ancient Greece to modern playful cartoon characterizations, is not scientifically impossible. Remember, he said that small wafer can hold up to 70,000 times its weight once it's quantumly locked. Once those little electrons decide they're not going to move because they don't like what's happening around them. So become locked in that moment in space in relation to the source of the magnetism that they feel. Now, if you scaled up that little wafer into a large platform, I don't know, maybe in a circular shape, I wonder how much locking you could do at what altitude. It's very interesting. So this version, if you will, this creation of this thing, this landmass that is depicted all throughout history, talked about, called the home of Zeus, formerly called Mount Meru to the Indians and Mount Olympus to the Greeks. This is the boat of Ra that carried him through the sky. And many times it's depicted as something that actually destroys things. This is one of the depictions of Castle in the Sky, like a kind of like a, you know, alien spacecraft shooting a laser beam down on a skyscraper. This is a more modern depiction from a Marvel cartoon animated series called What If. Also, a spherical floating orb destroying a building from the sky. But let's look at something really fascinating. This is from that same movie we looked at in part 19, from Rogue One, where the Death Star fires upon a planet. I took the sound out for copyright reasons. I don't want them to shut the stream off. So in this movie, they have a fully functioning Death Star, and it's hovering over top of a planet, creating an eclipse, and it fires once it reaches the totality of darkness from the eclipse, and then moves away. And then they take the time to show you that it was just hovering above the land, not very far up. Guys, what I want to communicate to you, and we've got much more presentation to go in this part 20. What I want you to start understanding and thinking about is that what the ancient Greeks called Mount Olympus, what the ancient Indians called Mount Meru, where the gods lived in the sky, what the Egyptians referred to as Ra's place, his boat, where he traversed the sky, is a livable landmass that they believe that these people lived at. It's literally the home of Satan, the dragon. That's where he goes and puts his feet up. When he retires for the day, make sure no human can sneak up on him and take authority over him or do whatever, or cause problems for him, or cause him to defend himself, and then suddenly he's slaughtering mankind without cause, and then the angels got to get involved. A place for him to have solitude away from all the nonsense on the ground below. A literal, just like First Enoch tells us, the angels in heaven have literal houses. They have literal places where they live. Just like we're promised at the resurrection to literally inherit a plot of land inside the New Jerusalem. The places, the many mansions Yeshua went to prepare for us. Even in our resurrected bodies, it's going to be made in the same capacity of an angel, to have the same capacity to be able to move throughout the creation at will, to fly, to not be worried about the downward pull, just like Yeshua exemplified in Acts chapter 1 when he descended into the firmament in the sight of his disciples. Just like the angels show us all throughout Scripture. Even though they can do all of that, they still have a home that they go back to. And so does this rebellious angel. There's I don't think people realize just how much that this idea has already been put into your head. Whether it's the Jetsons, whether it's Cloud City from Empire Strikes Back, whether it's just throughout the decades, there's so many opportunities the industry, the propaganda industry has used to put this idea into your head, which, as we just saw, the elites of the world are planning to make this a reality. They want to have commerce be on the ground and the authority structure of that commerce to be in the air. That's going to matter as we review the scriptures here in a minute. This was the ancient depiction of Mount Olympus to the Greeks. That he lived in the sky, and Zeus, also called Jupiter, would also eclipse the sun. So people would start to ask, okay, but wait a minute, Sean, why can't we always see this? Like, what's going on? Like, all right, so we're pointing it out with photography, with high telephoto zoom lenses, capturing eclipses. We're looking at it. It's been talked about in history. We're looking at the propaganda being infiltrated throughout modern media, movies and TV and comics. They're talking about literally doing it to the mass public for the sake of the environment. They're talking about having people live in the sky. Why, if there's something that's been up there this whole time, a livable landmass, why can't we see it? You guys didn't realize that I had it in front of you this whole time. Anyway, since we started this series, I've put it in the sky of each one of these pictures. But you didn't see it because you didn't know what you were looking for. You didn't know what you were supposed to be looking at. Even if you had looked at it, you didn't know what you were seeing. Just like when you look at an eclipse, they tell you what you're seeing, but you don't really know what you're seeing. It's been in front of you this whole time. It's been in front of all of us, above us, this whole time. So just let the thumbnail to this entire series just be a small example how it literally could be in front of you the whole time. You just don't know what you're looking at. I've done this is part 20. This presentation has happened consistently throughout the last 12 to 13 months. We're on part 20 now. I've put this slide, I've put it up for every single part of this series. People have watched these episodes and rewatched them, and not once has anyone asked me what these dots are in the sky. Because they don't know what they're looking at. The same way the enemy knows that you don't know what you're looking at when you look up in the sky. Because they've already told you not to believe Enoch and Jubilees. They've already told you that that's somehow not appropriate for the Bible, when it used to literally be part of the Bible, as far as this manuscripts and scriptures. They've already told you that you can't believe Genesis 1 or the entirety of the Enoch describing the creation model or Jubilees chapter 2. You can't believe any of that, or Psalm 19. They've already told you that you can't believe what the Bible describes as the place where you live. So therefore, if you looked up at the sky and saw something, you wouldn't even know what you were looking at. Just like we reviewed in part 19, where Crow 777 is looking with his telescope and he sees something floating in the sky that's not moving. It's a bright object that can't be seen with the natural eye. It can only be seen with a certain optical lens effect that he puts on his telephoto high zoom telescope. And then suddenly it appears and he realizes it is moving, but it's moving very slowly, traversing across the sky. He doesn't know what he's looking at either, but he sees it. And it was just happenstance that he caught it. It's been in front of us this whole time, folks. So as you can see now, we've talked about the past, and I'm not done. We got a lot more to cover. Just want to help you understand this initial image I created for this entire series. We talked about the past. It's there. It's been there. Was it created as a part of the Tower of Babel at the very beginning? I think so. This is why we tried to show you in Ball Top Towers in part 18 some of the imagery where they show a tower and a floating levitating ball next to that tower in many different movies and concepts. Same thing with the modern presentation, where literally the European Union has a building mocking or a building that's designed to be the typical representation of the Tower of Babel. And then as you can see in the future here, you actually have the top of a large skyscraper, but then there's a levitating platform with things levitating on the platform with someone sitting on top of it in the sky, and Mother Babylon into the far distance, also levitating. So let's look real quick at why we possibly can't see it. There's a lot of reasons why. Sorry, guys, I was muted. So the reason I'm showing you this is because I believe that this particular image I'm showing you is for dramatic effect. I believe this particular guy, he's not in a lab. He's not in this. He has a plastic casing over this thing. He just bought a green screen cloth and is using it to try to act like he's got an invisibility cloak. But I'm showing you this for dramatic effect because as we're going to see here in a minute, there's more to it. There's people actually creating things that can disperse the visual spectrum, and you see right through it and you don't see them behind it. So let's look at those. This is a guy in his own shop where he lives. He built an invisibility shield.
A while back on February 24th, actually, I put out a video on how I made my very own invisibility shield. Now credit where credit's due. That project All right, ladies and gentlemen, our shield is basically done. And what I've done different with this handle assembly as opposed to that one is I've actually put it together with screws. So it's all in mechanical bondage that can be undone. Just because I'm shipping this thing all the way to Chris Ramsey, it'll be a lot easier if I can take it apart, put it in a package, and then he can reassemble it upon arrival. So yeah, now that it's done, we're going to give it a final clean, and then I'm going to take it out and play around with it.
This is a guy, this is just a regular dude. He built this on his own. It's not that hard. He knows how to do it. Yes. Yes, someone in the chat is talking about, like, exactly. You got it. Just like the beetle, like we discussed in part 19. One of the representation characters of Ra, pushing the black thing through the sky. The beetle represents something whose body has microscopic structures that can refract different types of light spectrum and change its color. Yes.
Can you see me? My dog can't either. There's my dog. There's me. And that is an invisibility shield.
Obi! He has no idea where you are.
A company called Hyperstealth shared their patent-pending technology a few years ago on social media. Its original intent was to be used by the military and out of the public's eye. But turns out, it was just too cool not to share.
That's insane, dude.
And let's not act like this invention is anything new. It uses lenticular lenses, the same material used in those 3D DVD covers or the McDonald's hockey cards I had as a kid, only without the image. I've actually used this principle in a magic trick developed by inventor and magician Luber Fielder. He calls it Luber's. You can imagine how exciting this concept is to me. Going from smoke and mirrors to smoke and lenses could possibly open up a ton of opportunities in the magic space.
Dude, that's
Here, now, going behind it, it'll stretch out those horizontal lines, but it'll delete the vertical ones. So as long as I'm vertical behind this thing, like, it'll pretty much delete.
Pretty fascinating, right? Right in front of your eyes, just manipulation of the materials. As long as they have the right conditions, you see right through it. There's something behind it. There's an entire person behind it with depth, but you can see right through it. So, and how appropriate that the moment that they have the ability to make these, they're thinking, what kind of magic can I do with this? How appropriate, right? Revelation 18. What is Revelation 17 and 18. What is Mother Babylon chastised and reprimanded for as it's being destroyed? For causing the nations to drink of its sorcery. Yes, I know a lot of people like to talk about pharmakia. That's the root of the word. Yes, but it's used for other ways too. Just in general, the idea of magic. Pharmakia is a part of that, sure. But here's other practical concepts related with that. As we talked about in part 4, ancient flying machines. In ancient India, had vimanas. According to one of the texts of ancient India, called the Drona Parva, as part of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana Vedic texts, one Vimana, which is a flying ship of some sort that was usually used by the gods. It was described shaped like a sphere, and it borne along at a great speed on a mighty wind generated by mercury, which is quicksilver. So just like we talked about when we looked at the presentation on the superconductors, the guy said, "Oh, the cooling part where they get it to cool with the liquid nitrogen." They're like, "Oh, this is easy. It's cheaper than milk. We can make this stuff all day long." In the same way, in the ancient past, they could also superheat things to their desire, and they used mercury, also generically called quicksilver. I reviewed that in my NASA episode, I believe, which is part 12. So this was written about in the ancient Vedic texts written in Sanskrit. So in ancient Sanskrit, the Vimana, it means measuring out or traversing. It was an actual craft that carried people along. It was considered the chariot of their gods. So Bowden, professor of Sanskrit at Oxford University in 1890, he translated the word Vimana as a chariot of the gods. The Pushpaka Vimana was a gigantic plane the size of a large city, entirely capable of holding unlimited numbers of people. This is from Professor D.K. Kanjalal's observations of the Matsya Purana. This is in the last 100 years the statement was made. So in Sanskrit, the Samarangana Sutrahara, it's written that strong and durable must the body of the Vimana be made, like a great flying bird of light material. Inside one must put the mercury engine with its iron heating apparatus underneath. By means of the power latent in the mercury, which sets the driving whirlwind in motion, a man sitting inside may travel a great distance in the sky. The movements of the Vimana are such that it can vertically ascend, it can vertically descend, and it can move slanting forwards and backwards. With the help of the machines, human beings can fly in the air, and heavenly beings can come down to the earth. And heavenly beings can come down to the earth. I'm not talking about the angels above the firmament. I'm talking about the inhabitants on Mount Meru or Mount Olympus living underneath the firmament in our high atmosphere. This is literally an ancient Sanskrit writing from Vedic texts from ancient India, directly telling you how the quote unquote gods, we obviously know they're not really God, right? How they traversed from great heights down to the ground. And it's even talking about its engine, this mercury engine. It goes on to further explain that in the laws of the Babylonians, which is the Hakata, it unambiguously states that the privilege of operating a flying machine is great. The knowledge of flight is among the most ancient of our inheritances. Our inheritances, huh? Well, that's interesting. That means it's been passed down to you. It means they had it before them. He goes on to say, a gift from those from upon high. We received it from them as a means of saving many lives. Guys, if that's not the same propaganda that we see today. Oh, we want to save lives. That's why we got to go do this. That's why Jeff Bezos he needs to save lives. If we need to have trillions of people live on this earth, the earth can't handle that. We would be unsustainable on the earth. How are we going to do that? How are we going to save all those lives? We got to make them live in the sky. The same lies, guys. Practices of Babylon. So a lot of people that more student history may ask me, and this is why I actually want to cover this real quick. They'll ask me, did the Babylonians also speak Sanskrit? I thought that was over in ancient India. Yes. Yeah, they had trade with them. I mean, all of the known Middle East received their spices, most of them from ancient India, with all kinds of trade routes. But in addition to that, yes, they had envoys that would travel back and forth. And so the same type of looking Vimana is a part of the Babylonian, Sumerian, and Akkadian hieroglyphs, where the gods were flying in the sky. You can clearly see this is a craft with multiple people inside. We talked about that in part 4, so please go see part 4 of this series for a greater in-depth breakdown of that. But as we continue tonight in this, This is Peter Sahota, the PhD Indian philosophy in the modern day. So an actual PhD from India. He says during the middle second millennium, that's about 1500 BCE. So this is approximately about the time of Gideon, maybe, in the Bible. Indo-Aryan tribes migrated both east into India and west into northern Mesopotamia through an Indo-Aryan wedge as new waves of Indo-European migrants came down into present-day Iran, and the earlier wave was wedged apart. Those who went west became sort of a ruling elite of the Hurrian people to form a powerful Mitanni kingdom. The evidence for this is seen in the treaty between the Mitanni and the Hittites. Guys, that the Hittites all over the Bible, the ones that Abraham bought a burial plot from Ephron the Hittite for Sarah when she died. It says the evidence for this is seen in a treaty between the Mitanni and the Hittites, which references the deities, the Mithra, the Varuna, the Indra, and the Nasatyas, as well as a few other Mitanni documents using Sanskrit vocabulary. Mitanni Sanskrit is considered to be a slightly more archaic form of Sanskrit than the Vedic Sanskrit. Sadly, these people seem to have got lost in subsequent history, but thankfully those who went to India are keeping this tradition alive. Okay, so now we have a direct documented link of ancient Mesopotamians interacting through treaty with the Canaanites, the ancient Canaanite regions, including Mesopotamia, with the Sumerians and the Akkadians and the Syrians interacting with ancient India. So this is why when we go up here and we read a statement like this in this book written about the laws of the Babylonians from ancient Sanskrit, it's because they had interaction with them. And they talked about receiving as an inheritance the ability to fly. They received it from those who are upon high. That's crazy. This was always there. The Indianologist William Clarendon, who has written a detailed description of the Mercury vortex engine in his translation of the Samaranga Sutrahara, he quotes this: inside the circular airframe, place the Mercury engine with its solar Mercury boiler at the aircraft center. By means of the power latent in the heated Mercury, which sets the driving whirlwind in motion, a man sitting inside may travel a great distance in the most marvelous manner. 4 strong Mercury containers must be built into the Vimana. The Vimana, which is the aircraft, develops thunder power through the Mercury. And also it goes on, not him, but another person from the Aeronautical Society of India. This is, this guy's name's hard to say. Vimanika Shastra, Aeronautics of the Maharshi Bharadwaja. I don't think I said that right. Either way. He says that according to the Rasajyan, I can't even say that word. According to that really, really tough word, the Sutra number 2, the pilot is the one who knows the secrets. There were 32 secrets the pilot needed to learn from competent preceptors, and only such a person was fit to be entrusted with an aeroplane and no others. There are 32 of the workings of the Vimana. He must know the structure of the aeroplane. He must know the means of its takeoff and the ascent to the sky, and how to drive it and how to halt it when necessary, how to maneuver it and how to make it perform spectacular feats in the sky without crashing. Those secrets are given in Rahashya Laha. Pilot training for ancient Vimanas, written down and documented. 32 secrets, 32 chapters on pilot training. Actually, if you guys want to go to our to West Blaze Music channel and go check out Uncommon Ground episode 8, I go over some of this stuff and I actually talk about some of it. We're going to talk about a couple of the different things that the pilots learned and how they piloted the Vimanas. That has to do with why we possibly can't see the different cloaking techniques of Mother Babylon. But at the same time, I just want to direct you to that video where we go over it in greater depth. It's called The Alien Deception. It's episode 8 of Uncommon Ground. Furthermore, another gentleman named Gudha, he says that as explained in the Vayutattva Prakarana, by harnessing the powers, the Yasa, the Vyasa, the Prayasa, in the 8th atmospheric layer covering the Earth, that sounds pretty high up, to attract the dark content of the solar ray and use it to hide the Vimana from the enemy. So this is where it's described as covering the flying aeroplane Vimana to where it looks like a black blob, dark content. And they say they pulled this ability from part of the light spectrum coming out of the sun. And you have to be at a certain layer of atmosphere in order for this to happen. Another gentleman, Drashia, he says, by collision of the electric power, this is also from the Aeronautical Society of India, it says, by the collision of the electric power and the wind power in the atmosphere, a glow is created whose reflection is to be caught in the Vishwa, the Kriya Drapana, or the mirror at the front of the Vimana, and by its manipulation, it produces a camouflaged Vimana. So he takes the light reflection, the glow of light from the sun, onto a mirror and somehow manipulates it around the entire structure. So do you guys remember what we looked at in part 19?
So there goes the moon on a very bright object that could not be seen in the visual spectrum.
It's interesting, right? It's interesting. We'll keep going. This is part of NASA documented, published statements about Mercury engines. Do you guys know that NASA has their own Mercury engine? NASA's in, by the way, guys, in case you didn't know, NASA's in love with ancient India. They literally, from the 1980s, had a guy trying to write an AI code based on ancient Sanskrit. He believes it's the perfect language to write an AI code in. They shape many of their fake crafts that don't actually leave the firmament after some of the patterned Vimanas from ancient India. The word NASA in ancient Sanskrit means destruction. Again, go check that out in part 12 of our Investigating Babylon series. I go over it in great depth. NASA talks about the impulses generated in 7 stages. The mercury propellant is first vaporized, fed into the thruster, discharge chamber, ionized, converted into plasma by a combination with electrons broke down electrically, and then accelerated through small openings in a screen to pass out of the engine at velocities between 1,200 to 3,000 kilometers per minute, or 745 to 1,864 miles per minute. Guys, this is that those type of numbers means when they turn on this Mercury engine and it does the plasma, convert it into a plasma, which goes through this electron process, creates the thrust. That means what you're seeing in the sky disappears. Anywhere from 700 miles per minute, that's not per hour, that's per minute, to 700 to 1,800 miles per minute. That means you see it once and then it's gone the next, the moment they turn on their engine. You just hope they're pointing in the right direction. Don't point at the ground. But why would they even need to worry about being pointed at the ground if they're quantumly locked? That's how they just hover. Here's the actual rocket motor ion thruster that we just read about, a mercury bombardment type. It's an 8 centimeter, and this is actually in the Smithsonian, supposedly. And we've got its documented number with an actual tag on it as well. And the summary is that it's an 8 centimeter mercury type ion or electric rocket engine tested for the NASA Space Electric Rocket Test Program. Ion engines produce minute streams of electrically charged ions that expel in one direction, thus producing thrust and forward motion in the opposite direction. This is something that was created back in the 70s, guys. The engine was shown fired for 15,000 hours with 461 restarts between August 1973 and November of 1975. This object was donated to the Smithsonian in 1978 by NASA Lewis Research Center. The governments of the world already know about this stuff, guys. They're literally in cahoots under the authority of Mother Babylon. There seems to be some sort of principle out there that they have to release some type of information to the public for some either it's how they troll the public, knowing that they believe you don't think that you're going to figure out what you're looking at, or they have to release the information for a sense of plausible deniability and some, to say, hey, we told you we knew what we already had this tech and we already knew what these things are. And that we told you what we're planning to do in 100 years, have everyone live in the sky. We told you. We told you we were planning to reduce the world population by 95% through a variety of ways. We told you. And did anyone stop them? Yeah. So here's more sketches from ancient Vedic texts of Vimanas, specifically the triangular shaped Vimana that we read about being described earlier, and also the Mercury engines that are at its corners. And then we see modern day pictures. There's actually a triangular shaped ship by the Air Force that has its own patent, and people think that's what they're seeing with these pictures here on the right. And as you see, the picture on the far right with the green background, you can actually see the outline body of the triangular shaped object. But the picture in the middle with the yellowish orange tint, this one looks like it's employing that cloaking mechanism where it's using the light, spreading the light around the exterior body of it so that you can't actually make out what it is. You just see a triangular shaped light going through the sky or hovering in the sky, just as was described in the ancient texts. So now we're going to take a look at something interesting called the Kondo effect, and this is going to be another example of modern day established known science that can explain the idea of the motions of the flight, like we read from those 32 training methods for the ancient Vimana pilot, and one of them was he must know how to ascend the craft into the sky, and it can move forward at a tilted vertical, or it can move backward. He must know how to do all these things. Well, there's different ways they can do that. There's different mechanisms within how you manipulate the air around you, and one of them is called the Kondo effect. All right, and so this is just a basic graph. I'm not going to explain the graph. Thankfully, I have a fun video for you to look at that that will be able to explain it better than I could.
Founded by Romanian physicist Harry Kondo in 1910, the Kondo effect is a tendency of a fluid to be attracted to a nearby surface. This concept has been an important application in areas such as aerodynamics and hydropower. But what does it mean exactly? Well, the Kondo effect can be demonstrated in various ways. Take for example, if you were attempting to blow out a match but the cup was in between. One would imagine the cup to prevent you from doing so. To your surprise, the cup actually has little effect as the flame was put out anyway. But how is this possible? As mentioned before, the air, behaving as a fluid, follows along the curved surface of the cup and essentially goes around it. A more popular example uses a hairdryer and a ping pong ball. If the ping pong ball is placed into the airstream of a hairdryer, what do you think would happen? Naturally, one would think the ball would shoot off, but it doesn't. It actually levitates. But let's see what happens when we change the angle of the hairdryer. The effect continues and the ball stays trapped. But why is this? When the ping pong ball is in the airstream, the flow from the hairdryer pushes the ball up while the gravity pulls it down. Because the ball is also in the way of the flow, the air continues to flow past the ball due to inertia, increasing its velocity. As it is passing by, the faster moving air pulls the slower air because of viscosity, also known as fluid friction. This creates an area of lower pressure which is formed between the ball and the stream, which pulls the airflow back towards the ball, and the ball towards it. As this effect is caused around the entire ping pong ball, the forces equalize, and the ball essentially levitates inside. But not all fluids interacting with curved surfaces are a result of the Kondo effect. Take for example a spoon. When the water from the faucet hits the curved surface of the spoon, one would often mistake the sticking effect as the Kondo effect. But the sticking is caused mostly by surface tension from the water. Sorry, Henry. So how is the Kondo effect used today? Various aircraft uses this concept to utilize the air moving over the wing to be bent down towards the ground, resulting in aerodynamic lift. In air conditioners, the Kondo effect is exploited to increase the throw of the ceiling-mounted diffuser. Because the air that leaves the diffuser sticks along to the ceiling, it thus travels further throughout the room before dropping in velocity, compared to a diffuser installed away from the ceiling. In meteorology, airstream flowing out of the mountain ranges has been studied using this theories, where the effect on the agriculture and the vegetation has been documented. So thanks to Harry's contribution to science, maybe you could use the Kondo effect in creative ways.
Okay, guys. So this is someone that's just in their own backyard. They create a little bitty drone based off the Kondo effect, and it's considered a vertical takeoff and landing drone, what they call a VTOL, unmanned aerial vehicle. As you can see, it behaves exactly like you would see the idea of a Vimana. And it's using this Kondo effect in real life application and demonstration. Flies around, can go pretty fast. This is just a small little example. Detailed movements, incredible maneuverability, agile movements. Pretty wild, huh? Pretty wild. So the Kondo effect is just another way that this same concept what's being described to us and what we've seen, what I testimony has declared and filmed, what the government says is possible, not only in the present day, but 4,000 years ago in ancient India. All of that is possible. People are demonstrating and doing it. It's possible. It's not impossible. Real quick, let's look at one more quick idea here. This is actually, I'm going to skip through some of this video for the sake of just things that aren't important, but this is something called an ion drive, and this is MIT has created something called an ion drive. And if you listen carefully to what we just and compare it to what we just read from NASA explaining the Mercury drive and how it ionizes and converts into electrons, this concept, it's very similar. But MIT has created something without propulsion that uses electrical ionization and creates a temperature differential to create thrust without any type of combustion of any kind. Check it out. It's very interesting. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the sound off because I can't remember if there's copyrighted music in this or not. But here is the flight of this ion craft. There's no propellers. There's no rocket engine. There's no engine of any kind. It's literally strips. Think of like little LED light strips. And those are being powered. One LED light strip is at a different magnification, if you will. Let me see if I can find the point where they're going to explain it. These little electrical bars, one is at a different frequency than the other. I think I missed it. Hang on one second. I think they're going to show a little diagram to show you how it's creating this thrust based on a differentiation. This is without propulsion. There's no slingshot. They just turn it on and it creates thrust silently. There's no propeller. There's no rotor. Here they are. Here they're going to explain it here. So it just shows you as one charge is greater than the other, it creates a differentiation and essentially like a how do I say this? Just a vacuum, if you will, that creates a sense of thrust between the two charges, which in itself creates its own wind thrust out the back. This is what MIT has figured out. They think that they're onto something. I think that they're just rediscovering what certain civilizations have known, certain leaders of civilizations have known this whole time. But they're all excited about it. So that's ion thrust, example of ion thrust. No propellers, no slingshotting, no engines. And they're already, this little graphic you're seeing of the CGI of this airplane lifting off like Star Trek, that's what they're trying to say. this type of thrust can lead to if they can perfect it. Remember, like I said earlier, all these experiments I'm going to be showing you, these are at a microscopic level. All these could be scaled up. So here is an idea. That was at MIT. So people think, wow, the average person doesn't understand that, right? It's MIT. Well, how about this guy in his backyard?
Okay. It's a self-contained ion-powered aircraft. It has a power supply on board. It's called the Charlene model. And here it goes outside. It has a safety tether above it, so the height won't limit it. Go. Oh, shut off. There we go. Let's try it again. Let's try it again.
Just so everyone in the audience understands, the tether that he has to the top of it, to the line, that's not, no one's pulling the line, no one's pulling the tether. He's turning on the electricity through those rings, creating that differentiation, creating the thrust. That's what's causing it to go up and down. So it's just tethered to something so that it doesn't fly off and, and break itself. Because this is just one of the models he's working on in his backyard. The point is, he's literally holding a joystick that you can get at Walmart that he's retrofitted to this little metal ionized contraption to create this differentiation, to create the thrust. This was done, I believe, he says, the rest of the video for like less than $100.
More. Oh, okay. One more. Should I leave it running?
Yeah, and then maybe not to the full throttle.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Best we can do until we fix the steering.
Yeah, that's a successful backyard experiment right there, man. I mean, scale that up. I mean, think about just putting a solar cell on there to create the electrical charge that you need, and then suddenly you're adding some. Yeah. Anyway, there's so many ways they can do things, guys. There's so many ways that we just have not been taught growing up because they intentionally control the education process. This is part of it. This is part of their control over humanity. Let's look at this real quick. This is just another way they're talking about. This is, I know this is going to sound crazy, but this is actual lasers that they figured out that they can actually use lasers to lift particles. Now, right now, again, micro scale, they say that they can't, this picture that you see of this lady being lifted by 3 lasers is an exaggeration. They can't quite do that yet, but they're definitely on their way. And I'm about to show you that this is from Australia. They realize they can levitate objects using lasers. And this particular example uses 3. I'm about to show you a guy in a shed in his backyard that can lift diamond particles with just one little bit of laser. Because it's going to be great. So this isn't a big research lab. This is just some dude lifting diamond particles with a laser in his shed out in the woods.
Anybody who watches this channel knows it's definitely possible to blow things up with huge lasers. But did you know you can actually levitate stuff with laser beams? Now, in order to set up your optical trap at home, you first make sure that the air is very still around you. Now you take the marker and stick the very tip of it inside the focal point of that laser beam, and then slowly draw it back. And now sometimes you'll see some little particles there trapped in the focal point of that beam. Now you can even move around the laser very slowly, and those particles will stay trapped in that beam there, and they'll stay there indefinitely until the air current knocks them out. Pretty cool. In fact, this effect has been known about for several decades now, and there's something called optical tweezers, where scientists use beams of light to move around little particles like cells in front of a microscope. And there's actually a Nobel Prize awarded for this discovery. Probably the easiest to understand explanation for this effect is based on the fact that light carries momentum. Now this is actually the same property of light that might be used someday to send tiny spacecraft to nearly the speed of light. and buzz other stars by just hitting them with laser beams for a really long time. Now diamonds have an extremely high index of refraction. They bend light really, really strongly, so it would seem that diamonds would be a great material to levitate in a laser beam. Now I'm not the first guy to think of levitating diamonds with a laser beam. There's actually a guy by the name of Nick Vamivakis that levitates diamonds for experiments in quantum physics. And now, I'm not going to do any groundbreaking experiments in quantum physics for you guys, because I'm, doing this experiment for $20 in a storage shed in the middle of nowhere. But that being said, I am going to levitate some diamonds. I went on eBay and bought this bag of diamond powder for something like $8, so this is not an expensive experiment to perform. Here I have my diamond powder and my laser in a very still room. And now, I started by trying sprinkling some of those little diamonds into the laser beam, and I couldn't get any of them to stick. I was making too many air currents for that. But when I stuck the diamond powder on a piece of paper, and then picked up the laser, and put that powder in the center of the focal point, I was able to pick up some of those diamonds there. And what you're seeing are actual frickin' diamonds being levitated by frickin' laser beams. Amazing. And yeah, I guess that's about it for this video, so until the next time, stay safe and happy lasing.
Stay safe and happy lasing. Yeah. So the Australian research team figured out like a tripod of lasers to levitate microscopic mirrors. This kid was just using one little bitty laser that cost him like $8 to levitate diamond particles, which is hilarious. And this whole concept has been shown to us in movie after movie after movie after movie of aliens invading and lifting people off the ground. And in modern movies like Transformers and Superman and other things, they're using magnetic lev, not entirely lasers, but the imagery that they're showing you is that these ships above that are hovering and levitating silently have the ability to lift things off the ground. So, something to keep in mind. Just the imagery that they're showing you, right? So let's look at one more real quick. This is going to be drawing us to our greater point here. It's wild.
This is a footage of the clouds over Lincoln, Nebraska. It's there to remind us that air is liquid too, or at least it behaves like liquid. Buoyancy, a concept firstly described over 2,000 years ago, when a man called Archimedes was taking a bath. What buoyancy tells us is that every liquid will exert a force upon an object that is submerged into it. How much force, you ask? The exact same amount as it's needed to displace the liquid around that object. That's why things float in water. If you have a boat that's overall less dense than water, then it would float. Thanks, buoyancy. But air is fluid, so this very same concept should apply here too. And it does. If we were to make a ship that is less dense than air, it would float. That's how zeppelins and hot air balloons work. But hot air balloons are a bit boring compared to a mile-wide floating city.
A what? A what? A mile-wide floating city? Huh. Interesting.
Buckminster Fuller. His idea went something like this. Make a sphere 1 mile in diameter to completely enclose the air inside. Warm that air by a few degrees Celsius and then sit back and let the whole sphere float up high. That's it. Did you notice that I didn't mention rockets or some big fans or sails, etc.? That's because the sphere would float just because of buoyancy. The maximum buoyancy force from the air at the sea level at 20 degrees Celsius is 1.2 kilograms per cubic meter. This means that the air can lift the maximum of 1.2 kilograms per cubic meter. The average volume of a hot air balloon is around 3000 cubic meters. If we were to use this formula, we can calculate that if we were to heat up the air inside of the envelope by 100 degrees Celsius, the density difference that would occur would allow us to lift 760 kilograms with that balloon. But a mile-wide sphere contains way more air than ordinary hot air balloons. 700,000 times more to be exact. 2.5 million tons of air. Since we have more air to work with, we don't have to drastically increase the temperature for us to have a liftoff. We can increase it by just a few degrees. If we were to use the same formula as before, we would see that this sphere could lift 24,000 tons if we were to increase the air temperature by just 5 degrees.
Does anyone in the live chat know what 24,000 tons equals? There's 24,000 tons and there's 2,000 pounds per ton. What's 24,000 tons? How much weight is that? See, we got the calculator out real quick. What's 2,000? I think a ton is 2,000 pounds, right? 24,000 tons. How much weight could that mile-wide sphere lift just based off buoyancy? Just increasing the temperature inside, the air inside that by 5 degrees. I think someone said 48 million, right? 48 million pounds. That's a lot. That's a lot. And now imagine if you had multiples of those spheres within the base, or just, I don't know. What if you had the ability to make it bigger than just a mile? You can make the platform or the base. You don't have to use the sphere shape. You don't have to use the sphere shape. Just like we see Zeppelins don't use it entirely a sphere shape. It's more of a rectangular, oblong, circular shape, conical. How much could you lift? You have multiple ones enclosed in a basement-like structure beneath a mile-wide city. The air is trapped. It's never going anywhere. Just change the temperature to raise yourself up and down. That's if you're not quantumly locked already. How do you propel yourself? Mercury engines with ionized mercury or simple ionization differentials? Not that hard. I mean, if you have the right materials, it's not that hard. It's just a manipulation of what's already been created. Oh, and could you cloak a mile-wide city? Looks like there's a lot of ways out there you could do that too.
Does it take a lot of energy to heat up that much air, even by a few degrees? Yes, absolutely. It takes a lot of energy. This much energy to be precise. In other words, we would need a 17 megawatt heater to work without stopping over the period of 10 days to heat up that much air by just 5 degrees. But that's not that much compared to the energy from the sunlight that sphere would receive. The top part of the mild-wide sphere would receive this much energy on a clear day at the equator. That's more than enough energy to heat up all that air. Whether or not this is a feasible idea is out of my knowledge, but nonetheless it's a nice little thought experiment. Imagine that, floating around the globe in a city ship.
Imagine that. Imagine that. So Buckminster Fuller, inventor in the 20th century, that was his main idea, or one of his ideas. He also wanted to put an entire dome around Manhattan, by the way, but the city of Manhattan said no. But he invented cars that could get 30 miles per gallon and hold like 18 people. He invented all kinds of unique things. And one of the things that he had a patent for is that sphere that could be built. And the air that the sphere traps as it's enclosed and the exterior structure is completed, change the temperature in that, and then you can levitate that sphere. Crazy, right? Crazy. So the point is, it's not that difficult. Now we're about to jump into some scriptures here in a minute and tie all this together for you. But before we do that, we're going to, I know. How could you name somebody Buckminster? Like, what kind of 18th century carryover name is that, guys? But now we're going to go into what you saw in the trailer for this episode, for this part, which is the black stone at the Kaaba in Mecca. It's actually referred to by those in the Islamic faith as a sacred stone that is a piece of paradise, they claim. I want to stress that. They claim. And it's called the black stone. Now, this silver thing that you see around the black stone is actually an encasement Apparently, several hundred years ago, there was a war in Saudi Arabia or wherever it was being held, and before it was transferred to Mecca, and it was damaged, and so the remaining piece of it they put in this silver encasement to try to protect it, so that in case it gets dropped or something happens, it would be protected somehow. So this particular building is called the Kaaba. It's in Mecca, and it's where Muslims go throughout, for their pilgrimage to Mecca once a year to go run around this thing furiously, chanting a mantra and bowing down to it. All those white things you see around this black box is thousands of people bowed down on their hands and knees. And as you can see, in the bottom right-hand corner, the little label says the black stone is actually on the exterior corner. You can even see the little silver piece of it stuck out. So this is the little silver piece at the corner of the black stone. How ironic, when I'm about to explain to you what this black stone is, how ironic that they put this as the quote-unquote cornerstone of this building, of this black cube of Saturn. Another name for Satan. How ironic, eh? So, as a part of this religion, they run around this thing once a year, praying and bowing down to it in worship, and then they walk around to it trying to touch it. They want to touch the black stone for expiation of sins. I kid you not. They believe that touching the stone will give them expiation of sins, atonement for their sins. So here is the black stone. Here's people guarding it. Here's an up-close view of this black stone. And here's people praying and touching it, making vows to it. They take this seriously, guys. They take this super seriously. But the question is, where did this thing come from? What is this thing? Why do they revere it so much? Why is it protected by the full force of the Islamic nations? Why is it called the Sacred Stone? Acts 19, 21 through 24. After these things had happened, Paul resolved in the Spirit to go to Jerusalem after he had passed through Macedonia and Achaia. After he had been there, he said, I must see Rome as well. He sent two of his helpers, Timothy and Erastus, to Macedonia, that's northern Greece, while he stayed for a time in the province of Asia, that's modern-day Turkey. About that time, there arose a great disturbance about the way, that's being a disciple of Yeshua. It began with the silversmith named Demetrius, who made silver shrines of Artemis, bringing much business to the craftsmen. Demetrius assembled the craftsmen, along with the workmen in related trades. These are idol makers. Men, he said, you know that this business is our source of prosperity. You guys remember what we talked about in Image of the Beast with Nergal, how the temple of the foreign gods was a place of commerce. He goes on to say, and you can see and hear that not only in Ephesus, but in nearly the whole province of Asia, Paul has persuaded a great number of people to turn away. Turn away from what? Turn away from their false god worship to worshiping Yahweh through the authority and the priesthood of Yeshua of Nazareth. That's what. And then he goes on to say, this Demetrius guy who's stirring up contention against Paul, he goes and says, he says that man-made gods are no gods at all. There is danger not only that our business will fall into disrepute, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited and her majesty deposed. She who is worshipped by all the province of Asia and the whole world. Guys, what we've been talking about throughout this whole series, that the pantheon, the family of multiple gods worshipped by these different cultures were shared by all the cultures. They just had different names for them because why? After the Tower of Babel, they walked away speaking different languages. But as I show in part 1 of this series, they already were worshiping these false gods before they started building the tower. So when the tower was destroyed, and potentially things associated with it, partially destroyed, the people walked away worshiping the same gods, but calling them different names. Here, Demetrius in what's modern-day Turkey, what ancient Ephesus back then. You guys remember New Testament book to the Ephesians? If Ephesus, the dominant pagan god that they worshipped at the time was Artemis. And I'm going to actually go into how much they worshipped Artemis and how it was a huge point of tourism for them. He's worried. He's an idol maker. He makes statues like you see on the right-hand side to Artemis. Because in Greek mythology, Artemis was the sister of Apollo, What have we talked about in part 7 of this series? We talked about the Greek god Apollo. The Latin transliteration of his name is found in Revelation 9 as Apollyon, or Abaddon in the Hebrew. We talked about who this character was. He's considered the first beast in Revelation 17:8, the one who came up out of the pit in Revelation 9:1. The one in Revelation 13:7-10, who's given the authority of the dragon, that's Satan, to go out and persecute the saints. This was supposedly his sister, the daughter of Zeus, sister of Apollo. Now, this is in their Greek pantheon of gods. I personally don't, from everything I've shown in this series, don't believe that Zeus or Satan actually took a wife and had kids. I think these people were adopted under him, under their authority, and then in the stories told to the people referred to as family, literal family. But I don't think that's the way it goes, because of what Scripture tells us who Apollo was and where he came from. He was Nimrod, Genesis 10:8. That's his origin. He was called Nimrod in Jubilees chapter 8, verse 6, I believe. He's the one that later became Baal to the Canaanites. He's the one that was Apollo to the Greeks. He was Surya to India, and he was to the Egyptians. He was considered Osiris, and he had a sister wife. Remember, he had a wife. That was his sister. Osiris married his quote sister. Her name, Isis. She's Ashtoreth to the Canaanites. She was Diana or Artemis to the Greeks. You know that modern version of this is that Wonder Woman character. So that's Artemis. That's Diana to the Greeks. So when the men heard this, they were enraged and began shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." Soon the whole city was in disarray. They rushed together into the theater, dragging with them Gaius and Aristarchus, Paul's traveling companions from Macedonia. Paul wanted to go before the assembly, but the disciples would not allow him. Even some of Paul's friends, who were officials of the province of Asia, sent word to him, begging him not to venture into the theater. I like this guy, right? They're like, "No, don't go in there. They're mad at you because you've been taking away all their disciples and causing new converts for Yahweh." I like this guy. I would have went in there too. I've just been like, hey, he's already been going to the temple of Mars or the hill of Mars to reason with them and try to persuade them away from their false worship in the book of Acts. So why not go in here and take on these followers of Artemis? Acts 19:32-34. Meanwhile, the assembly was in turmoil. Some were shouting one thing and some another. Most of them did not even know why they were there. The Jews in the crowd pushed Alexander forward to explain himself, and he motioned for silence so he could make his defense to the people. But when they realized that he was a Jew, they shouted in unison for about 2 hours, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." That's a long be shouting for 2 hours. Finally, the city clerk quieted the crowd and declared, "Men of Ephesus, doesn't everyone know that the city of Ephesus is guardian of the temple of the great Artemis and of her image, which fell from heaven? Since these things are undeniable, you ought to be calm and do not do anything rash. For you have brought these men here, though they have neither robbed our temple nor blasphemed our goddess." So guys, check this out. Look at the different translations from this Greek passage. Now, this idea where it says her image that fell from heaven. In the Greek, the word arenos is used for heaven. Yes, it can mean the firmament, like it does in 2 Peter 3:10. Yes, it can mean the atmosphere in the sky above, which is in the clouds or above the clouds. And yes, it could also be used for the spiritual heavens, as in the New Jerusalem coming down from the heavens above, right? Down through the firmament, through the actual physical structure. I challenge that this particular use in Acts 19 is talking about from the sky, the use of this word heaven. So if we look here in Acts 19:35 in the King James Version, it says, "The city of Ephesians is a worshiper of the great goddess Diana and of the image which fell down from Jupiter." So this doesn't even use the word Arenos. It just says the image which fell down from Jupiter. That's Zeus. Where? Where's Zeus, according to all these people that believe? He's on Mount Olympus, where above the clouds in the sky above, but not above the firmament. Just in the sky above them. And they believe that this particular rock fell down from Zeus. It's also the translation, the Young's literal translation of the Greek actually calls it Zeus. We look into what was going on in this city of Ephesus that Paul went into. Guys, I don't know if you realize this or not. I honestly, some of this research I didn't realize until I really started putting it all together, just how much of a hot zone Paul kept walking into every time he went on a missionary journey. This guy was like, you know, you're as you can see from the riot that got started, these are super indoctrinated cult members into these cults of these different gods. The particular cult of Ephesus, worshiping Artemis, was super severe to the point where it became, as I'll read it on here right here, it is actually a huge point of tourism for hundreds of years. For centuries, worshippers of Artemis flocked to the ancient city of Ephesus in present-day Turkey for an annual nativity rite. Young men, known as Koretes, hiked to the summit of Mount Solmosis, beating their spears on their shields and diverting the attention of the Greek goddess Hera from the travails of her daughter Leto as she gave birth to Artemis and Apollo. This is a ritual they were doing. The Hera wasn't actually giving birth at the moment, and this is a ritual they were doing. The Koretes were initiates to whom the mysteries of Artemis were revealed. The Koretes were initiates. They did this every year. They would choose these initiates who would walk up this mountain, beating their spears on their shields, making a ruckus. And when they got to the top, the secrets of Artemis, the mysteries of Artemis were revealed. After the ceremony, there were feasts with drinking and dancing. This is a big deal for centuries, for approximately 600 years. So from the late 4th century BCE to the middle of the 3rd century AD, Ephesus enjoyed a good run until Rogers says finally, the Koretes quit the big show on top of Mount Solmosos. After nearly 6 centuries, the curtain fell for the last time on the mysteries and the sacrifices. So here on the right-hand side, there's a carving of some of these sacrifices. There's actually a little baby on the ground, guys. People dancing around him with swords out. I don't think it went well for that baby. And there's coins that were minted from this ancient concept from Ephesus here, where they're also celebrating in this ritual with dancing and with their shields and swords. The space station, or the space organizations of the nations, have a new accord that they've all signed on to for peaceful exploration of deep space. And guess what? They call it the Artemis Accords. Just throwing that out there. If you guys want to see more, well, actually, before I say that, let me also explain that all the space agencies of the different nations promote this false heliocentric model that is the opposite of what the Bible describes. And they promote a origin story of Earth called directed panspermia. And directed panspermia is what they promote and push. This is directly from the NASA website. This is what they claim about why there's a ball in space and how life began on the Earth. They don't believe the scriptures. They have their own story, and this is their story. When scientists approach the question of how life began on Earth or elsewhere, their efforts generally involve attempts to understand how non-biological molecules bonded, became increasingly complex, and eventually reached the point where they could replicate or use sources of energy to make things happen. They're, of course, speaking about their theories of evolution, unproven, unseen, undemonstrated nonsense. Ultimately, of course, life needed both. Researchers have been working for some time to understand this very long and winding process. It's already been explained to you through the scriptures that they were all created at the same time. That's why they had both to begin with. It goes on to say, and some have sought to make synthetic life out of selected components and energy. Some sterling progress has been made in both of these endeavors, but many unexplained mysteries remain at the heart of the processes, and nobody is expecting the origin of life on Earth or elsewhere to be fully understood anytime soon. To further complicate the picture, the history of Earth is one of the extreme heat caused by, the history of early Earth is one of extreme heat caused by meteoric bombardment, and most importantly, the enormous impact some 4.5 billion years of Mars-sized planets that became our moon. As a result, many early Earth researchers think the planet was uninhabitable until about 4 billion years ago. Yet some argue that signs of Earth life 3.8 billion years ago have been detected in the rock record, and life forms were certainly present 3.5 billion years ago. Considering the painfully slow pace of early evolution, the planet, after all, supported one single-cell life for several billion years before multicellular life emerged. How do you get multiple cells out of a single cell? This is where evolution comes in, right? So we're almost done, guys. Thanks for bearing with me. Some researchers are skeptical about the likelihood of DNA-based life evolving into a relatively short window between when Earth became cool enough to support life and the earliest evidence of actual life. So, what else? From a scientific as opposed to a religious perspective, and now they're about to give you a religious perspective, what else might have set in motion the process that made life out of non-life? That's illogical in every way possible. One long considered yet generally quickly dismissed answer is getting new attention and a little more respect. Oh, so this is a new theory they're proposing. It involves panspermia, the sharing of life via meteorites from one planet to another, or delivering by comet. In this context, the question generally raised is whether Earth might have been seeded by early Martian life if it existed. Mars, it is becoming increasingly accepted, was probably more habitable in its early period than Earth. But panspermia inherently goes the other way as well, or possibly between solar systems. A team of prominent scientists at MIT and Harvard are sufficiently convinced in the plausibility of panspermia. That means they're already sold out to an indoctrination of religion that they can't see, test, demonstrate, or prove. They have spent a decade and a fair amount of NASA and other funding. That means your money. They spent your money investigating a religion they can't prove to design and produce an instrument that can be sent to Mars and potentially detect DNA or more primitive RNA. I think they rediverted all those efforts into vaccines. Anyway, in other words, life not only similar to that on Earth, but actually delivered long ago from Earth. It's called the Search for Extraterrestrial Genomes, or SETG. Just ridiculous. If you guys want more information on NASA, all of its deceptions, all of its relations to ancient Babylon, go check out part 12 of this series where I review that in depth. Luke chapter 4, verse 1 through 2. Then Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, he returned. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Let me just say something real quick before we move too far away. In case I'm as always with these presentations, I'm putting things out there. I'm showing you pieces of what's all going to push together. And right now, I'm about to push everything from 19 previous parts and everything I've said in the last hour and 54 minutes in part 20. We're about to show you how it all comes together. Okay? So we were just looking at the black rock that the Acts chapter 19 said that there was something that fell down from heaven from Zeus or Jupiter that was a part of worship to Artemis in Ephesus 2,000 years ago. Did you guys, one of the actual traditional cultural beliefs of Islam is that the black stone, the sacred stone at Kaaba, wasn't always there at Mecca, right? Because Mecca is a new creation, but it wasn't always there. It was actually held previously in the Temple of Artemis. It's exactly what Acts 19 told us. There was an image that they worshiped that they considered fallen down from Zeus. Now, I don't care. It's just a rock to me. They think it's basically a version of obsidian. It doesn't matter what it is. It has no special powers. It has no special ability to atone for your sins. It's literally become an image of idolatry for them to worship instead of Yahweh. So, and I mean, even in a trolling mockery way, with Yeshua, who does expedite our sins through his priesthood, is considered the Rock of Ages. They're worshiping a literal rock to try to get atonement instead of the person who can represent you to God to give you atonement. I mean, it's all twisted on its head in mockery. But the point is, whether that particular little black rock fell down from Mother Babylon, from where Zeus lives, from where Ra lives, from where Satan himself abodes, that's inconsequential. The point is, they worshipped it from the story that they knew, that they thought that's where it came from, because that's how ingrained it was in their minds, that the gods lived in the sky, and they had vehicles to traverse from their place where they lived in the sky to where we live on the ground. That symbol of that thought process and a specific god is now worshipped by an entire Islamic nation and protected and enshrined at Kaaba, or at Mecca at the Kaaba. So they're just worshiping Artemis, the supposed daughter of Satan in Greek mythology. There's nothing new under the sun. Islam is just an offshoot of worship to the overall Mother Babylon. And okay, anyway, hopefully you guys get that. Let's talk about Yeshua. Let's talk about the Savior. Luke chapter 4, 1-2. And then Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing during those days, and when they had ended, he was hungry. Makes sense. The devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, tell this stone to become bread." But Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone." Then the devil led him up to a high place and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And he says to him, "I will give you authority over all these kingdoms and all their glory." That means their wealth. For he said, "It has been relinquished to me." Boy, that's a statement, isn't it, guys? This is Satan right here, the one that Revelation 12:17 says that the one that deceives the whole world. He's now saying that all the kingdoms of the world and their wealth has been relinquished to me. He controls them. And he led him up to a high mountain to see all the kingdoms of the world at once. He says, "I can give it to anyone I wish. So if you wish, if you worship me, it will all be yours." But Jesus answered, "It's written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." Matthew 4:8's account says it like this. Matthew 4:8-11. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. "All this I will give you," he said, "if you will fall down and worship me." "Away from me, Satan," Jesus declared. So Jesus is passing this test. Even on a geocentric, flat, stationary, firmament-enclosed earth, there's no mountain on the earth that you can go to and see all the kingdoms of the earth at once. But if Mother Babylon is what I've been describing to you throughout this whole series, yes, you can. If it's what was described as the home of Zeus, a Mount Olympus, that the earth was spread before it, high above the earth, high above a flat stationary earth, you could see all the kingdoms of the world at once. So he goes on to say, the devil, at verse 11 says, "Then the devil left him and the angels came and ministered to him." So I'm putting forward here that the reason why, remember the first temptation out of the three temptations of Yeshua by Satan, the first one was to turn stones into bread. He passed that test. The second one was he took him to the temple, said, "Throw yourself down, kill yourself," because he misquotes Psalm 91 to say he'll cause the angels to protect you. You won't die. Yeshua passes that test, doesn't take the bait. Then he takes him to a very high mountain to be able to see all the kingdoms of the world below them at one time. He says, "These are all mine. I'll give them to you if you worship me." I'm sure it's the same lie he's told every king on earth as well. And Yeshua says no. And then at this point, the angels came and attended to Yeshua. They ministered to him. Is it possible because he needed to get down? It's been in the Bible the whole time, guys. We just have to know history. We just have to take these words seriously. Luke chapter 10, 17-20. The 72 returned with joy and said, "Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name." So Yeshua told them, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Behold, I've given you authority to tread on snakes and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. Nevertheless, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven." So I want you guys to think about what's happening here in Luke chapter 10. He sent out the 72 disciples. He says, "Go into these towns. They'll take you money with you. Go and preach the gospel of the kingdom of God, heal the sick, cure the lame, all that stuff," right? They come back and they're just overjoyed. They had a successful missionary trip into the towns of Samaria. They come back and they're just like, "Oh my goodness, we had this great time. And even the demons submitted to us in your authority, in your name." Remember Mark chapter 1 when he he cast a demon out of the mute person, and all the scribes, Pharisees, and the people sitting around them was like, who has this kind of authority that can do this? No one else that we know can cast out this type of demon. So these disciples are also ecstatic, considering what they were used to, and now Yeshua comes along, and now they have greater power than any other religious leader that they've seen in their lifetime, to be able to take authority over all the demons. And they're excited. Naturally, you would be. And you come back to Yeshua and you're like, we can help people. We can actually help people because of your authority. We can actually help people. They're excited. And Yeshua immediately pops their balloon, so to speak, right? Immediately tries to bring them down to humility. And he says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. From what? From Aeronaus, the Greek word heaven. It can mean above the firmament. It can mean the firmament itself. Or it could just mean the sky. When did Yeshua see Satan? And I know the story, guys, but based off of the book of Adam and Eve and Christian tradition, that's not in Scripture. People like to say that Satan fell to the earth from before the Garden of Eden. That's not in the Scriptures. In fact, we see that's not the case because in Job 1 and 2, he's even going back up to the Father's throne on the seventh layer of the firmament and presenting himself to the Father with the other angels. So what is Yeshua talking about? How did he see him fall like lightning from heaven? It was in the third temptation when he said, I'll give you all these kingdoms of the earth if you bow down to me. And Yeshua said, get away from me, Satan. Satan ran as fast as lightning. To what? Where can he go if he's on a high mountain? He descended. He fell as fast as possible from the sky, from heaven above, from the place where he took Yeshua. This is after the temptations. This is after a year or two so after he's been discipling his disciples. And he sent them out. They came back. They're excited to have authority over the demons who are subject to Satan, right? Yeshua tells them, that ain't nothing. I spoke to their leader. I saw him fall like lightning from heaven. That's how much authority I have. That's the kind of authority that I've exemplified. What you guys are doing, don't be excited that you got authority over the demons. I've given you this authority, yes. Don't be excited about it because all you need to be excited about is that your name is written in heaven. You didn't want them to get puffed up on this, this excitement. But he exemplified the epitome of authority over the most evil one who controls all the other evil ones below him and made him flee from him as fast as lightning and descend away from him. Someone in the live chat's asking, where does Satan hide today? My brother, I've been showing you this whole 2 hours and 4 minutes. He has a home and abode in the sky. That's where he took Yeshua in Luke 4, Matthew 4. He is a place where he puts his feet, where he rules over the nations, his home base, his dragon's lair. No one can see him. We're going to go over the scriptures that talk about that as well. So this is why he took him to this very high mountain. They can see all the kingdoms of the world at one time. This is why the angels would have to minister him to help him get down. Yeshua could do miracles, but it doesn't say that he could fly. I know he walked on water, but he doesn't show that he can fly until after he's resurrected. But the angels have always had that ability. And they can move like lightning. Revelation 18, 1-2. After this I saw another angel descending from heaven with great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his glory. And he cried out with a mighty voice, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a lair for demons and a haunt for every unclean spirit, every unclean bird, every detestable beast. What happens to Mother Babylon? Fallen. Fallen is Babylon the Great, who became a haunt of demons, a lair for every unclean spirit. Those are the people that are subject to Satan. Fallen is the city that those things inhabited. Revelation 18, 3-4. This is at the return of the Messiah, or this is close to the return of Messiah. This isn't ancient Babylon from 400 BC that was invaded by the Medo-Persians. This is future. This is prophetic. This definitely wasn't AD 70 either, guys, for the preterists out there. This is future. This is right before they're close to the return of Yeshua. And I'm going to go over that timeline as well before we end this broadcast. Revelation 18:3 and 4. All the nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her immorality. The kings of the earth were immoral with her. The merchants of the earth have grown wealthy from the extravagance of her luxury. Then I heard another voice come from heaven say, come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins or contract any of her plagues. So if this dragon's lair, and we're going to go over this in more depth shortly, the dragon's lair, this is why I say this angel that's warning people after it's fallen, the one that shouts, it's fallen, then shouts from the sky, from heaven, come out of her, my people, so that you not share in her sins or contract any of her plagues. That's because those haven't happened yet. Her plagues that come upon all the people that are allegiant to Babylon, we go through those in the trumpet, seal, and bowl judgments. This is at the beginning of the 42 months that kicks off the great tribulation of the earth. Revelation 18:5 through 7. Her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Give back to her as she has done to others. Pay her back double for what she has done. Mix her a double portion in her own cup. As much as she has glorified herself and lived in luxury, give her the same measure of torment and grief. In her heart she says, I sit as a queen, I'm not a widow, and will never see grief. Therefore her plagues will come in one day. Death and grief and famine, she will be consumed by fire, for mighty is the Lord who judges her. Then the kings of the, you remember that, guys, she'll be consumed by fire. Then the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury will weep and wail at the sight of the smoke rising from the fire that consumes her. In fear of her torment, they will stand at a distance and cry out, woe, woe to the great city, the mighty city of Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. What did we talk about at the beginning of this segment, of this part 20? The elites of the world, they want to engineer the world so that people live in the sky, interact in the sky. Commerce is done in the sky. The workforce is on the ground. Kings of the earth, those who've been made wealthy with their interaction with Babylon, will stand at a distance when they see that she has fallen, destroyed by fire. And in 1 hour, this judgment comes upon her. In 1 hour. This starts the 42 months leading up to Yeshua. And we're going to get there. We're even going to go to Revelation 12 here shortly. Then a mighty angel picked up a stone the size of a great millstone, and he cast it into the sea. And he says, with such violence, the great city of Babylon will be cast down, never to be seen again. This is not describing ancient Babylon that was partially taken over in the 4th, 5th century BC and then taken over again by Alexander the Great in 3rd century BC and then later actually destroyed. Like this is not talking about that. That's already happened. This is another great city of Babylon in the future that's going to be thrown down like a great millstone. And I have here this picture of a millstone, that grinded mill. Huge, cylindrical, circular, circumference shaped rock that would be elevated, that goes in the circumference. This is what a millstone was. And to throw one of these down with great weight, very likely break it. Oh, and by the way, it just so happens to look like the symbol for Ra. The circumference with the dark circle in the middle. I bet that's just a coincidence. So in the vision that John sees in Revelation 18, the angel, a mighty angel, strong mighty angel, not a regular one, but specifically notated as a strong and mighty angel, takes a huge millstone and casts it into the sea. And he says, like this, Babylon is going to be destroyed. No one in all of history and all of agricultural history, no one took a millstone, from a place where they would grind mill, take it to the sea and throw it in the sea. No reason for that, and it was super heavy. This is a millstone. It's the symbol for Ra. It's the representation of the dark body that causes an eclipse. Revelation 18:21, a mighty angel picked up a stone the size of a great millstone, cast in the sea, saying, with such violence, the great city of Babylon will be cast down, never to be seen again. I know, I can already see it, guys. There's going to be people that are going to watch this. They haven't watched the previous parts of this series leading up to this. They don't understand everything we've placed as understanding the names, the definitions of terms, how they're used throughout scripture and history, all the corresponding evidence that I've put forward. They're only going to see this one episode in this one particular part for whatever reason. It'll be passed around and clipped. Who knows? And they're going to be like, this guy's crazy. He doesn't understand prophetic language. That it wasn't taught just to say the words fallen. It means the city was brought to nothing, right? It was destroyed. And that's what it says. It was destroyed by fire. It doesn't mean it's fallen out of the sky. How crazy is that? Just be patient with those folks. Just understand, just try to do your best. That's why I created all these different videos, a whole series, a bunch of time and effort put into explaining every single piece of this all throughout the way. Guys, this whole thing, people since, I've understood this since 2015. And there's been other people that I know in ministry and that have YouTube channels with that do scriptural review and Bible studies. And they've asked me who behind the scenes, they'll ask me, what do you think Mother Babylon is? Because some people think it's, modern day New York City. Some people think it's modern day Jerusalem. Some people think it's the revived Roman Empire. Some people think it's going to be a new Turkish empire that's going to arise. And I just smile and I say, I don't know how to explain to you. Like, it would take it's a long conversation. Because I know if I just come out and tell them, guys, it's literally a city that's going to be, is already in the sky, but it's going to be the point of authority to which they're going to build other cities and places of habitation in the sky. And it's going to be destroyed by fire that comes out of heaven, which is actually part of the first trumpet judgment that kicks off the 42 months of tribulation, and it'll be thrown down to the ground and destroyed, thrown in the sea, technically destroyed, and the whole world will see it. And that's what makes Satan mad and starts persecuting the saints. Let's go to the scriptures that tell us this exact story. Revelation 12, 7-9. There was a war in heaven. What does that word mean? Is it always above the firmament? Is it the firmament itself? That would make sense, right? It's because you're not having a war inside of a physical structure or on a physical structure. There was a war in heaven, in the sky above. There's a war in Aranos. One of the uses of the Greek word Aranos, in the sky above. Michael and his angels, also means messengers, warred against the dragon. That's Satan. That's Ra. That's Zeus. That's Jupiter. Warred against the dragon and his angels. And he did not have the strength, nor was found a place for them any longer in heaven. Guys, the wording is the same in all the Greek texts. And thank you, Abraham Sewell, for sending me a recent Indian Hebrew translated text. It's the same in all the texts, Hebrew and Greek. There was no longer a place found for them any longer in heaven. That means there once was a place in heaven for Satan and his messengers and his cohorts, the unclean spirits that are subject to Satan. There was once a place for them up there, but because of this initiated conflict, Michael comes down with his crew to where the dragon's lair is and kicks him out of the sky, kicks him out of his place of authority. And the thing comes down and is thrown into the sea. That's why there's no longer a place for them any longer in heaven. They can't go back home. It goes on to say, and the great dragon was thrown out, the ancient serpent, who's called the devil and Satan, deceiving the whole inhabited world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a great voice in heaven saying, now the salvation, the power, and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, because the accuser of our brothers have been thrown down, and the one accusing them before our God day and night. Guys, it's telling you, he's literally in his home, in the upper atmosphere, shouting I don't know if he's shouting. I don't know how he's accusing, other than looking up, speaking up to heaven like everyone else does when they pray, and accusing the brethren of the saints, accusing them of our wrong deeds, the ones that Yeshua atones for us and gives us mercy and grace for, the accuser of the brethren. And apparently he still even has the authority to, according to Job chapter 1 and 2, he can still go through the levels of the firmament if he wants to and present himself before the Almighty. He hasn't been, quote unquote, kicked out of heaven yet. He's been literally living within our enclosed reality, high above us in the sky, overseeing all of us, because he governs the corrupt, wicked rulers of the earth. He is, guys, the Eye of Ra, who oversees all the ventures of the corrupt nations. That's why in all the Egyptian hieroglyphs and all the Egyptian iconography that I showed you, the Eye of Ra is always at the top. You remember when we reviewed the masonry, and I think it was part 17. We reviewed the black sun and how it's a part of some of the mason aprons and some of the mason painting. I can't remember the structures they call them, but picture boards or whatever they call them in masonry, and how there was a sun and a moon, and there's the pillars and the balls on top of the pillars. And then at the back, there's the Eye of Ra at the top that sees down over everything. His home is the Eye of Ra. His home is what causes the eclipses, the solar eclipses. His home is what all the spheres across the earth represents and pays homage to. His home is still up there. But there will be a day when Michael shows up with some angels, just like angels show up all throughout the scriptures at the time that the Father says go, that the sin on the Amorites is full. I'm going to go judge them now. The sin, Genesis 18, the sin of the 5 cities of the plain of Sodom and Gomorrah is full. I'm going to go judge them now. And he sends angels to do something. This is, I think it's Isaiah 37. The angel that sent when Sennacherib is threatening with 184,000 Assyrians to besiege Jerusalem, and one angel comes down at the appointed time and takes out all those people. This is an appointed time that kicks off the 42 months of Revelation as a part of the first 4 trumpet blasts, because the 5th trumpet doesn't happen until the 5th trumpet tells you that the pit's opened up, the beast comes out, and that starts the 42-month reign of the beast under the authority of Satan. But what does it tell you in this passage right here? Revelation 12, 11 through 12. And they have overcome him by the reason of the blood of the Lamb, and by the reason of the word of their testimony. They have not loved their life unto death. Rejoice because of this, O heavens, and those dwelling in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, having great fury, knowing that he has a short time. He only has 42 months to reign. He only has a short time. Then the second angel, this is Revelation 8. We're going to talk about real quick some of the trumpet judgments, right? That happens at the beginning of the 42 months of the tribulation. Revelation 8, 8 through 9. The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. What do we read in Revelation 18? About the great city of Babylon that was thrown down and burning with fire. And the smoke of her burning rose, and everyone could see it from a distance, and they mourned because their livelihood, their economy was destroyed. A third of the sea turned to blood, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, a third of the ships were destroyed. This is a big impact. That's right, Abraham. This is why he's called the Prince of the Power of the Air. Guys, thank you for your super chats. I'm sorry I can't get to them all right now. Yeah, I appreciate you guys' super chats. Thank you so much, Stellar. And Quipstad, thank you. As you can see on screen, is it just a coincidence that in one of the recent Star Wars movies, this very thing that is representative of the Eye of Ra, of Mother Babylon, that rules the empire, the point of the seat of the throne of the ruler of the empire. Is it any coincidence that one of them that gets destroyed actually falls into the sea, and they go up to it in this in one of these movies? It just could be a coincidence. Revelation 8:7-9. The first angel sounded his trumpet. Hail and fire mixed with blood were hurled down upon the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, along with a third of the trees and all the green grass. Then the second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. What caught it on fire? The first trumpet. And therefore a third of the sea turned to blood, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, a third of the ships were destroyed. Verse 10 and 11. The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star burning like a torch fell from heaven and landed on a third of the rivers and on the springs of the water. And the name of the star is wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter like wormwood oil, and many people died from the bitter waters. A lot of people ask me, what is this wormwood thing? What is this star thing? I personally think this is something I can't prove, guys. This is why I just want to be very clear that of all the things I've been trying to show evidence of, both in scriptures and science and history, this is one thing with the wormwood and the oil that I have speculation on, but I haven't found good evidence to prove it. It's not mentioned anywhere else in scripture, but it would be what the ancient Indians, in addition to what they talked about being the decapitated head of Rahu, being what I just referred to as Mother Babylon, but also they had some other dark spheres up there that were put up there by the powers of the gods. And it's possible that one of these also falls to the ground as well. And whatever is inside of it, whatever it is that's causing it to be up there, as we've talked about, looked at the different types of ways that different gases and air pressures can levitate things, could possibly be what is turning things bitter. So that's my speculation. I want to be very transparent. I don't claim to have it all figured out, but that's one thing that I don't know exactly what wormwood is specifically, but it seems to be something that causes a bitter effect on the waters, and I don't know. So all I know is that it comes down to, this is why at the end of part 19, I had Rob Skiba reading some of these historical quotes from astronomers from the 18th century talking about how they knew there was multiple dark bodies up there that they'd observed, and some of them were interrupting the stars as they made their transparent move through the sky. This is why we see multiple things coming down from the sky, from the heaven, when these trumpet judgments start, and this fire comes from heaven down onto the earth. Well, that means anything in the sky between the earth and the fire coming down from heaven, from the firmament above, where the angels are enacting this judgment from these trumpets, that means anything in between there is going to get hit with that blood, hail, and fire. So if Mother Babylon is being held up in the sky from what we've been talking about, whether through air pressure that has temperature differentials or through quantum locking, which means there is a requirement for freezing temperatures. Well, those temperatures will be vastly disturbed if that place catches on fire. So it's an idea. Revelation 8:12-13. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun and moon and the stars were struck, a third of the stars were darkened, a third of the day was without light, a third of the night as well. And as I observed, I heard an eagle flying overhead, calling in a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, because the trumpet blast is about to be sounded by the remaining three angels." So these first four trumpet blasts happen all in the same time period at the beginning of the 42 months, from my understanding. And it's not until we get to that fifth trumpet is where we see, or I should say it like this. I have this is some graphics that we made from part 15 of this series. And all the trumpet judgments happen over the course of 42 months. But specifically, first 5 trumpets blast at the beginning of the 42 months. This is why the fifth trumpet lets out the beast from the pit, and he reigns for 42 months. And at the end of his reign, Yeshua comes back and kills him with his second coming. You guys see that? If you want more on the timeline and the breakdown of the seal, trumpet, and bowl judgments, go see part 15 of this series, The Four Horsemen Prophecies of the End. Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. At that time, Michael, the great prince who stands watch over your people, will rise up. There will be a time of distress, the likes of which have not occurred from the beginning of nations until that time. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. So what happens? Michael rises up, and then there's a time of distress. Revelation 12, 7 through 10. Michael and his angels kick Satan and his angels, his cohorts, the unclean spirits, out of the sky, out of their place of authority that they've been for thousands of years. And he's coming down to the earth full of fury because he knows his time is short. He knows he only has 42 months. That's why it says in Revelation 13, it was granted him a period of 42 months to persecute the saints. That's all he's got. He's got to do whatever plans he's got for that last 42 months, that 3.5 years. He's going to go full tilt. Does he know the day or the hour from which he's going to be kicked out of Mother Babylon and that'll be destroyed, and he can no longer hang out in the sky? Because think about this, guys. Think about this for 1 minute. Who built the thing he lives in? Does Satan come down to the earth and just open up? Does he go into Home Depot and just get a bunch of materials and start going building something? The Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel. Like I stressed from part 1, from the very beginning, over and over and over, I would say they built a city and a tower. I tried to infer multiple times. There's multiple things were being built. It's not just about the tower. Yes, the tower was for them to, like a big ladder, to get armies up to the firmament so they could try to get through the firmament and attack God and remove his seat of authority. I just doubt they knew how big the firmament was. But who's with them this whole time? Satan, whom they called Jupiter. We even showed you we showed you historical quotes from Josephus, how he talked about how they brought, the priests of Jupiter brought things to the building of the Tower of Babel. It was a part of the deception of the nations, deception of the peoples before they were spread into nations. They were the useful idiots that were brought forward to build all these things. So the reason I say that is because this sphere, that's Mother Babylon, has the ability to, that we've read, easily has the ability to levitate, hover, move, be in a circumference, geosynchronous type of orbit, if you would not. That's the horrible wording. Not geosynchronous, but just be in a geostationary, I should say, type of orbit where it can move if it wants, it can stay still if it wants, it can cause the eclipses to show the people that worship it. It's still there. It was built by man. He's using it because he was ruling over mankind as he was interacting with them. They viewed him as a person that was a god, but an actual walking, talking entity that commanded them and had authority over them, their great patron god. They would build things for him, not just in his honor, but for his use. And I'm putting forward that this is what happened during the Tower of Babel. They built his house for him so that he had a place to live and look over all the earth as king of the earth. As he says to Yeshua, all these nations were relinquished to me. I'll give them to you if you worship me. Thankfully, Yeshua doesn't fall for it. Why? Because Yeshua has a bigger, better house. And this mockery of a house that Satan has been dwelling in has to get kicked out of the way before Yeshua's house can come down. Think about that. It's in the way, guys. The enemy, through what he's tried to build and what he's living in, is a poor mockery representation of the New Jerusalem to come that descends through the sky of the firmament model. Everything in its way has to get out of the way. He has literally this whole time been mimicking what the scriptures describe our future to be, where he wants to reign on high on a mountain, Mount Olympus, high above the earth, and reign over mankind. That's Yeshua's job. That's going to be fulfilled once the New Jerusalem descends through the sky as a levitating, floating city slowly descending to the ground, to which the tallest mountain inside this 1,500-mile tall home of the New Jerusalem, there's a tall mountain inside there, and at the top of that mountain is Yeshua's throne, according to Enoch chapter 24. Satan wanted to put his throne among the stars. Yeshua's throne will already be promised to be among the stars. He'll be at the top of the highest mountain in the city of Zion. Yeshua will have the utter perfection of fulfillment, whereas Satan has mimicked in such a poor, lackluster, fearful, and cowering version of this seat of authority. He's hiding from the people because they'll see through him. Yeshua shows his glory to the nations because they will love and praise him. Sorry, it just gets me all teary-eyed. Hang on. I've got a new thing I'm going to be doing here for anytime I get teared up here on the show, talking about the goodness of God or our Messiah or the kingdom to come. I said, man, I told my wife, I was like, I can't use Kleenex, right? Because that makes you look soft. So instead I was like, I got a manly way I can wipe my tears. So I just use my sword so I can just kind of just wipe my tears with my sword. Guys, Mother Babylon is the home of Satan that's been in the sky this whole time. This is the storyline of the scriptures. And it's going to be thrown down and destroyed, which kicks off the tribulation period. That's why he's furious and knows he has a short time. Matthew 24, 21 through 22. From then there will be great tribulation such as not been from the beginning of the world until now and never shall be. Unless those days had been shortened, no flesh would have been saved. Why isn't Satan, who is clearly superior in his body because he's an angel, why doesn't he just ran through and killed everybody? We see angels can do that. Isaiah 37, the angel that destroyed 185,000 Assyrians in one night. Take him a month, go through the whole earth, kill everything. He doesn't have the authority to do that. He does have the authority to deceive and subjugate people. He's going to try to do that because he's furious when he loses his house, his seat, his throne, his ultimate throne of authority he's had this whole time. The only place of repose and comfort that he has on this earth, in the entire creation model. He doesn't live in hell. He doesn't live in Sheol below. He literally lives in the sky above. That's what's been said for ages. All throughout the Bible, the Hebrews believed this. All the nations around them understood and believed this. This is the story of the scriptures. Revelation 7:14. We know there's going to be a great tribulation because these are the people who've washed their robes and come out of that great tribulation at the resurrection. Revelation 7:14. From all the different nations. So we understand that the reason why I'm saying this is to show you the timing. Because many people might say, well, wait a minute, but how do you know this doesn't happen like when Yeshua comes back? How do you know it doesn't happen? Because there's tribulation happens after that. That's why he's full of fury. That's why he has time left, but not a lot. He's got a short amount of time. He knows his time is short. If he was happening the exact day that the firmament rolled open and Yeshua came down through with the angels, Matthew 24, 29 through 31, he's got less than a day to persecute people. He can't go across the world and persecute them for 42 months in a day. This is what actually kicks off the tribulation. From my understanding, is the actual throwing down as an incredible sign to the entire world. God exacts judgment on this thing, on him, his seat of power. How is this going to be played off to the world? That's why I've been showing you this alien narrative that's been built on a heliocentric model for hundreds of years. The Mother Babylon is thrown to the ground in judgment, burning in fire. decades in the future, after the world has already come to a place where they're used to things living in the sky, he'll be the panspermia. He'll be what's passed off over all the nations of the earth, who deceives the whole world. He'll be the origin that has come back to help us. Oh, and by the way, yeah, his Earth ship, his mothership that he lives in, yeah, we all live in the sky too, so it's not a big deal anymore. In fact, we can commerce and come and go to his great temple and worship him, all that kind of stuff. This will be the deception they'll tell people, in my understanding, from what they're planning, from everything I've been showing you, from what's possible with physics we've never been taught before, that they're now revealing to the masses. He'll be the origin of life on the earth, according to their false theology. And he'll impress everybody because they'll see he's got this floating mountain of land that he lives on, this incredible ship, a sphere, just like in all the movies that show us this massive sphere, all the video games that have this sphere that's coming to earth. It's been put into the propaganda for decades. So how will they play this off? Very easily. The bad aliens came, destroyed Mother Babylon, threw it to the earth, disrupted the entire economy of the earth. This is why they have to enforce the mark of the beast, so they can control the economy again, control the people, because they realize that point of authority was thrown down. Why? People will of course, they'll still be believers on the earth. And this is obviously when the Revelation 11 happens, the 42 months of the two witnesses start, and they're going to come shouting the truth. The kingdom of God is coming. Mother Babylon was destroyed because it's the home of Satan. It's evil. It's not good. It's leading you in deception. Repent. The kingdom of heaven's coming. The mighty Messiah, Yeshua, is coming. The truth is coming. You've been living a lie. That's why they come out. They're going to be disrupting things, because the enemy, they're the counter to Satan and the beast trying to come out and enforce their will on the people in such a violent manner that's never been done before. It's normally been done throughout this whole time through illusions and trickery, magic, sorcery, deception. But there comes a time when he loses his seat of authority and in shame has no place to go, and in fury comes after the people of the earth. Isaiah 24, 20-21. The earth staggers like a drunkard and sways like a shack. Earth's rebellion weighs it down, and it falls never to rise again. In that day, the Lord will punish the host of heaven above and the kings of the earth below. So this is the day of judgment. At the end of the day of the Lord, the kings of the earth are rounded up before Yeshua and judged. The hosts of heaven above are punished as well. That means they were up there. The hosts of heaven above are punished as well. 1 Enoch 53, 3-5. For I saw all the angels of punishment abiding there and preparing all the instruments of Satan. And I asked the angel of peace who went with me, for whom are these preparing these instruments? And he said to me, they prepare these for the kings and the mighty of this earth, that they may be thereby destroyed. And it goes on in verse 3-5 to say, and there my eyes saw how they made these instruments iron chains of immeasurable weight. I asked the angel of peace who went with me, saying, for whom are these chains being prepared? And he said to me, these are being prepared for the hosts of Azazel, so that they may take them and cast them into the abyss of complete condemnation, and they shall cover their jaws with rough stones, as the Lord of spirits commanded. Just as we talked about, Satan is Azazel. He had hosts subjected to him, as is told to us. We're going to go over the verse in just a minute. They're the ones who get attacked, if you will, by Michael and the good angels, to be kicked out of their place of authority and sent to the earth, and they're ticked off. 1 Enoch 54:6. Michael and Gabriel and Raphael and Phanuel shall take hold of them on the great day and cast them on that day into the burning furnace as the lake of fire, that the Lord of spirits may take vengeance on them for their unrighteousness in becoming subject to Satan. These are the unclean spirits, the powers, spiritual dark forces in high places, because they led astray those who dwell on the earth. Satan and his minions are thrown out of the sky, persecute the earth for 42 months. And when Yeshua and the angels come back for the actual second coming of Yeshua, they round up all these things, put them in, these unclean spirits that were subject to Satan, put them in chains and throw them into the lake of fire, where Satan is rounded up, put in a chain, and thrown into the heart of the earth for 1,000 years. So this is a different judgment for those unclean spirits who made them subject to Satan. Jubilees 10:11, and we did according to all his words, all the malignant evil ones we bound in the place of condemnation, and a tenth part of them we left, that they may be subject before Satan on the earth. These are the unclean spirits, the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim from before the flood. The angels rounded up 90% of them after the flood and put them into a part of Sheol. The other tenth was left to become subject to Satan. And they willfully chose to be subject to Satan. I think that's why they were the ones left. The other 90% didn't want to be. These willfully chose to be subject to Satan, from my understanding. This is why they're punished with the being thrown in the lake of fire and being spoken of as they are, as because they became subject to Satan. I believe the other 90% are going to be thrown in the lake of fire too. Don't get me wrong. I just think they didn't want to do all this, that being subject to Satan and continue deceiving mankind. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, famous passage. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this world's darkness, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Look at this, guys. In the heavenly realms. This is that word aranos in the Greek again. The word heavenly. The word aranos. Or is it? It is. But what's it talking about? Against the powers of this world's darkness. It's let's break down this word powers used in the Greek in this. Here's the word aranos, like we talked about. It doesn't have to mean above the firmament. It could mean in the sky. But this is the word that's used for the powers of the world, of the kretio, of the cosmos. And this is a Greek word specifically referring to Satan and his demons influencing the lives of worldly people. That's what it means to the powers, the cosmos. Is that a coincidence? That cosmic powers, the fake alien concept perpetrated on the back of heliocentricity, the cosmos, that word actually in the Greek, original Greek, means Satan and his demons influencing the lives of worldly people. Isaiah 25, 1 through 6. In that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. Guys, I'm just going to preface you. This whole chapter is talking verse. I'm sorry. This is actually a typo. One second. I got to get this right. 26. Let's do this right. Chapter 26, 1 through 6. In that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. Salvation is established as its walls and ramparts. This whole chapter is about the day of the Lord leading to the resurrection and the ideas of the resurrection and what happens. Open the gates so a righteous nation may enter, one that remains faithful. That is the resurrected saints that verses 19 through 20 describe in this chapter. Open the gates so that a righteous nation may enter. In that day, verse 1, in that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. That's where the New Jerusalem is going to sit down. We have a strong city. That's Zion. Salvation is established as its walls and ramparts. That's Zion. Yeshua is the King of Zion. The city of God, the kingdom of our Lord, comes down, and it becomes a resource, a physical food and water resource of salvation for the nations to come to, because the world's been destroyed at this point. Open the gates so a righteous nation may enter, one that remains faithful. That's the resurrected saints going to their allotment, their inheritance, their abodes, the mansions that Yeshua has prepared from this whole time. It says, you will keep in perfect peace the steadfast of mind, because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever, because God, the Lord, is the rock eternal. For he has humbled those who dwell on high. He lays the lofty city low. He's humbled those who dwell on high. He lays the lofty city low. He brings it down to the ground. He casts it into the dust. The feet trample it down, the feet of the oppressed, the steps of the poor. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, guys, because if you have to understand the details of the day of the Lord, how the mountains will be lowered and shaken into their valleys, how the valleys will be raised up to create a flat surface for the actual 1,500 square mile New Jerusalem to set down. But it says that Babylon is thrown into the sea. I'm going to say it's probably the Mediterranean Sea, which would be outside the perimeter where the New Jerusalem is going to set down. But if that whole area, the basin of the Mediterranean Sea, is raised up to become a flat plain, as all the other land around it is raised up and changed, then that means the pieces of Mother Babylon that falls to the sea burning and falls to the bottom of the sea on the day of the Lord, when the great earthquake happens and levels out all these areas, that means that thing's going to be brought back to the surface and not be covered by water anymore. Just like we see in that Star Wars movie, by the way. And then the people will be able to literally walk over and trample over the former Great Babylon that used to be at the bottom of the sea. Something to think about. So next week, we'll be talking about part 21, Evil Empire versus the Covenant Kingdom. This will be the final installment of this series. We'll discuss the Covenant Kingdom to come versus the Evil Empire. And I do hope that you join me for that one as well. Guys, I want to thank you for being with me today. This was a long one, but this is I still didn't even put as much information in here as I could have. I know this is going to sound silly, but this is, yeah, there's so much more information that could have been put in here, but that's, hopefully it come across to where you understand how I come to these conclusions, why it seems fantastical at first, but then you start to really look at the scriptures, you look at the creation model. That's super important. People think that we live on a ball in space. They're going to believe the alien narrative that they've been building into the society for decades. They're going to believe that. And it's going to be easily perpetrated. And Mother Babylon, that's always been up there as the home of Satan himself, is going to be brought back to the common knowledge of people, because there will be the great apostasy. People's hearts going cold. They're moving away from covenant with Yah. They're moving away from Torah. They're willing to persecute the believers of the earth. I wouldn't doubt it if the earth, in their setting, like we talked about, they're designed for the future, like Jeff Bezos mentioned at the beginning of this when I played that clip. I wouldn't doubt it if part of that design was for believers who reject all this. They'll be the ones still living on the ground. All the knowledgeable people, the enlightened ones who've willing to learn the secrets and mysteries, like the Artemis cult, are the ones that are able to live in the sky, right? The social credit score of it all, right? The ones that are willing to acknowledge their progenitor of panspermia, the origins, because Satan reveals himself again to the world to show them that he can look like a man. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm the eternal one, that I'm the alien, that I'm the advanced version of you. Look what we've evolved to now. Look what I can do. Right? He impresses them. Here comes the beast and the false prophet to try to push rulership over the earth, deceive with lying signs and wonders under the authority of Satan, just as 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 1-9 talks about. But all of it's done with the backdrop of them deceiving the minds of the world into a heliocentric narrative to which they can play off this idea of the rulers, the elites, those who are in worship to him can live in the sky, can live with him. It's not a big deal. They show that the science itself is possible. But then they're all debased. They're all removed from their place of authority on high. And even their place is their city. Even Babylon the Great, mother of harlots. What was Laputa? The harlot in Spanish? The floating city called the harlot, John Swift's work. What's Babylon called in Revelation? The whore. It's interesting, right? It's been a long day. I know some of you probably have questions, so I don't want to ignore your questions. I just can't promise that I can give you more than 10 minutes at the end of this to answer questions. It's pretty late, and my voice is starting to go out. But if you have any, I'll be glad to address some. I couldn't last time on part 19 because it was like I knew all your questions were gonna. If I try to answer them, I would give away everything I covered here in part 20. So now that you've seen the fullness of my thoughts on this, that's why I'm willing to take some questions at this point. Hannibal's asking a quick question. Will the third temple that's ordained by Yahweh be in Jerusalem here on earth or in Mother Babylon? I don't think it's going to be ordained by Yahweh, to be honest with you. I think it's not ordained by Yahweh, and it will be on the ground in Jerusalem, by the way. But I don't think it's going to be ordained by Yahweh. So just to clarify. Abram Soul, I think you're relaying a question, saying where is Pergamos? That was in Pergamos was apparently in I want to say Turkey. It's actually Pergamum. I don't know the spelling, or at least I don't want to get into the semantics of the spelling, but transliterations. But it's Pergamum, and I believe it was in Turkey, but it could have been in Lebanon, the region of Lebanon, right next to Turkey, in that northwestern part above Israel. So that's my understanding of it anyway. Mr. Bear saying it's clear. It's so clear like day. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome, brother. Hopefully it's clear. It's just such a, it's funny because you go over the thoughts, the scriptures, the evidence, just, everything that the enemy shows you, much less everything the Father's already prophesied and explained about the, correlation of the finality, the consummation of the ages, right? The day of the Lord and everything that goes into it, all the timing, everything we've covered and all these different parts and all the different these series. You start to realize that it, to me, this is the most practical conclusion of everything being spoken and said. And that's why the enemy has a coordinated effort for hundreds of years now to get people to disbelieve Genesis 1 so that they can push this narrative, which will come to a finality. And at the end of it all, as much effort as they put into this, the Father's still going to send some angels and destroy their entire narrative. This is why I love our Heavenly Father, because he's like, yeah, you can work for ages to try to fool people into believing something, but I'm going to wake them up. I'm going to wake them up to my truth. You can't get rid of my word off this earth, and you're not going to get rid of the piercing truth of my word that will open their minds to understanding, because I have my victor in the place of priesthood over them, who I trust with the fullness of my spirit to give to them as I please. And guess what? The Spirit of God, the breath of God, the Spirit of God poured out by Yeshua gives us understanding of his truth. This is how, no matter how hard the enemy tries to deceive us into believing to not trust our eyes and to not trust our senses, and to tell us that we live on some ridiculous spinning heliocentric model that is the opposite of what his word tells us. In a moment, he can wake people up, just like he did me, just like he did Wes Blaze Jones. He can wake people up in just a outpouring of his spirit, because Yeshua wants to give you the truth. That's all he can give you, is the truth. He's the way, the truth, and the life. So in his priesthood position, he has the ability to pour the Spirit out to you as he chooses, without limit. And with that comes understanding. Breaks through the lies of the enemy in a heartbeat. Master Soup is asking, where do you believe the wandering stars are located in the firmament? I don't believe they're located in the firmament. Oh, in the okay, the wandering stars, I apologize. I would personally believe that they're not wandering, as far if we're talking about the same thing. They're not wandering. You talk about the ones that go into quote unquote retrograde. We discussed that in our Uncommon Ground episode 2, geocentricity, no sphericity. That's just going to be in the same level that the other stars are, the same level of firmament. Each level of firmament's massive, by the way, lots of depth, lots of height. So I just believe they're in the 5th layer like the other ones, the ones that go into the flower pattern of retrograde. Oh, okay. New palms. I see what you're asking. Good. Yeah, good question. So, because the temple to Zeus was in Pergamum, and it was a huge thing. It was like the biggest one in the region, and that's where he's writing to those people in that area in that letter in Revelation 2. So that's why he's talking about that being the seat of Zeus, right? So I'm talking about the long-term dwelling, not one of the temples of a region or in a specific town. So hopefully that's a decent answer for you. So you guys understand it now? The entire heliocentric model is based off a representation of his actual house. I'm putting forward that the dragon's lair, the home of Satan, has had this whole time, is a sphere of land in the sky that's referred to as Mount Olympus. And the livable land on that levitating sphere is covered by a double-gated dome, as the Greeks reported. And that's where Zeus lives, and that's where he would traverse back and forward to the earth in Vimanas, as the ancient Indians talked about and the Egyptians talked about. And the deception that he tries to tell you for the last 300 to 400 years, that you live on a ball. He lives on a ball, not you. You live on a flat, stationary piece of land that the Father describes that's covered by a dome that has pillars and foundations over Sheol. You don't live on a ball in space. He lives on a ball in space. Did you guys know that the United States military classifies space as anything above, I think it's 70,000 feet? He lives on a ball in space. And he's been trying to tell you this whole time that you live on a ball in space. Yeah, that's right. He doesn't see curvature up there. Not at all. Yes, Stellar J, that's right. 1,500 miles cubed is a lot of square miles. It's a lot of livable land. I actually did a breakdown on that on Common Ground. Go check out that series on West Blaze Music's channel. So do you guys understand now why it's such a big deal for them to push worldwide with all these space agencies? The indoctrination since childhood. The paid astronomers that they are led through peer review process to only see and think certain things. Do you guys see why there's so much control over this narrative to keep people believing they live in a heliocentric evolutionary model? That was because they're shifting that original evolutionary design from the Big Bang into panspermia. They've got the groundwork laid. Now they're going to shift the narrative. They're going to shift the goalpost, if you will, to where they're taking the narrative, the groundwork, to push panspermia, which is that the Earth was seeded by former versions of ourselves who'd highly evolved, and maybe one day they'll come back. This is literally what they're saying. It's literally going to be the revelation of mankind, the unveiling of mankind, of Satan back on the ground. And I wouldn't even put it past them to tell people, oh yeah, I was here in the past. They used to call me Zeus and Jupiter. Because they're going to reinstitute open pagan idolatrous worship just like they did back in the day. This is what we've talked about in other videos on Kingdom of Context, and this is what we dissected in Mark of the Beast and Image of the Beast, parts 16 and 17, with Nergal, the second beast, also called Hades and Hermes and Anubis, institutes temple worship, but it's not to Yahweh. Who are they going to be worshiping? The first beast. Who does the first beast represent the power of? The dragon. Just like they did in ancient times. It's going to be reinstated, guys. Tyler says, "Oh, a lot of gravy." Yeah, take your time with it, guys. Watch it again. Download these, record these if you can. I don't know how long they'll be up. I don't know. They may just think it. People have no clue what they may just, not fear this because they think the average person won't get it because it's just the world's not ready to indoctrinate people into some of this stuff yet. Some of the stuff we've revealed the groundwork layers of indoctrination, but some of the other stuff, like I mentioned tonight, the world is just now being led into that form of indoctrination. So there's going to be a learning curve, or an indoctrination curve, I should say, for the next. This is why everyone asked me, I think Yeshua's coming back soon. And I'm like, no, 50 to 70 years minimum, maybe 100 to 200, depends on the enemy and how fast they progress with this plan. No, I don't think he's coming back anytime soon because all the conditions for which the enemy gets destroyed when he comes back is not here yet. The elites of the world are telling us your kids will be the one doing all this stuff. The bad guys, the people that are controlling the world monetarily, governance, they're telling us that our kids are going to be the ones living in cities in the sky. That's the plan that they're taking the climate agenda to. It's only to set up the other narrative of deception, which is to re-accept Zeus, the one they've been worshiping this whole time, and the beast, which is his underling, Apollo. Because Apollo was also represented as the sun god. And I went into that in part 7. Go check out part 7. That's why they were considered, the tandem, if you will. That's why the first beast is given all his authority from the dragon as soon as he shows up. It's just like days of old. So Yeshua says that when he returns, it'll be like in the days of Noah. Well, a lot of people don't realize that Noah lived 350 years after the flood. So according to my calculations, that's the Tower of Babel was built during that time. That means Nimrod was reigning under the authority of Satan, Jupiter, Zeus, already during that time when the Tower of Babel was being built. Yeshua returns. Zeus is reigning over the earth. The earth worships him, as Revelation 13 says. And his first beast underling is brought back, Nimrod, Apollyon. And they're also worshiping after him as well, just like days of old. Just like Yeshua said, like it was in the days of Noah. Just a thought. And Mackenzie's asking, it's crazy, don't they know the ending? That's why they're furious when it starts happening, in my opinion. That's why when the angel comes down and opens the key to the pit and the beast comes out in Revelation 9:1 as part of the fifth trumpet judgment, they know their time is short. That's why they go out to conquer immediately. There's no political savvy. It's just warfare. It's the destroyer. It's the destroyer aspect of Apollyon comes out. And that's why it says, woe to the earth. Satan comes down to you with great wrath and fury. He knows his time is short. Caleb Brooks, yes, that is my speculation, is that it's this spherical structure that is the dragon's lair, where he actually is home, the home of Satan, the home of Zeus, that was a part of a spherical levitating structure, was one of the structures built along with the tower and the city and everything. It's just not mentioned. But that's my speculation from all this, of where it came from, how it got there, who built it. It was the deceived people under the authority of Nimrod and Satan that built it. It was, remember, as we read, it was the place where Zeus would call the other quote unquote immortals. They weren't truly immortal, but they would call the other people in this ruling council he had to talk to them about how they would govern over the affairs of men on the ground below. They would come up to that thing. So, yeah, this is my understanding of all the conclusions I've come to. Several people, yeah, I hear you, Genty. I appreciate that. That's I will consider the book is a big thing. It's a big project. I have no time right now for everything going on to even start that. I'm still finishing the contextual study guide. I've got 2 other things I'm working on besides that. Lighthouse. So there's a lot going on in my life right now. But I do plan, after part 21's done, I do plan to try to download all these and burn them onto an actual series of DVDs that, we can have available if people want to, send us a donation of whatever they want, and I'll send them the DVD set. And then I'm figuring something out like that, and so that people can have access to it just in case my channel ever gets taken down. Obviously, I plan to keep and back up these concepts on other video platforms. Praise the Lord, Lighthouse is still a go, so that is going to happen. I know that they won't censor me on that, so but I do plan to have put this into some sort of DVD set. I don't know if I'm probably gonna cut out like the intro and me saying hi to the people in the chat and the questions at the end and any mistakes I made and all that kind of stuff. Probably cut that stuff out. It's just going to take time, but I will offer it in a DVD set. So. All right, guys, we'll take one last question, and I'm all done for tonight. And I'm actually, I've got a Kingdom of Context website that I've been working on. So I may be able to have, it just depends. It depends. I may be able to figure out a way, if I have the ability for them to do this, because it's like a template site that I'm renting basically. They have their own content management system and everything. So like it's already built in. I don't know if they're going to let me. I mean, I know I can just embed links to the YouTube videos, but if YouTube ever takes this down, I don't know if there's a way I can have it as a digital download or not, because it's such big files, but I can ask and see what they can develop. Who knows? But either way, we'll figure out a way to get this preserved, the series preserved, so that people can have it and share it and pass it around. Not yet, Westblaze, not yet. I got to figure out everything I've just been talking about. I mean, I can't stop people if they want to clip it, but and use it on their channels. That's just part of YouTube. But I would appreciate it if people didn't for the meantime. Yeah, I didn't see any spam, guys, but I appreciate you if you found it and stopped it real quick. I appreciate that. I don't see any spam on my end, which is weird. So thankfully we have moderators here that are on the ball. But yeah, it's funny how certain episodes get spammed and some don't. Like I'll go for months without spammers even noticing me, and then certain episodes get spammed. All right, guys. Thank you for all being here. Don't forget, next week, we're going to be looking at Evil Empire versus Covenant Kingdom. This is going to be the finality to this 21-part series. And hopefully these first 20 parts have been digestible. Hopefully they've been good as far as just bringing you along, step by step, just to understand, like, okay, here's all the pieces involved. Here's all the scriptures involved. Here's all the science. Here's all the, the observation, the testimony from history. And if we just have this mentality of the kingdom of God to come, because it uses the creation model he describes in scriptures over 500 times, then you understand how all this makes sense. So my heart, my goal is to help the Bible make more sense, easier to understand and read and share with others. So can you imagine now that how much of this story, or how much of this bubble bursting of this deception from the enemy, that the two witnesses will be shouting at the top of their lungs for 42 months to wake people up, to get them to think how many eclipses are going to happen in that 3-year time period. It's going to be interesting. No wonder they want to shut them up badly. No wonder people try to kill them. Something to consider, guys. All right. Pray for Lindsay and I that we can continue to do this as long as possible. and that we have the Father's favor, protection, and blessing. I pray all the time for the right words and wisdom to be able to share his information and represent him accurately as possible. Sometimes it feels very weighty to be teaching and talking about the kingdom of God like Jesus did, because, I know what happened to him. So just pray for us. I'm going to keep doing this, and hopefully you guys keep watching. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time.